StarCraft, the Terran Empire. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 51. Are you cool down there? Just as Augustus was about to contact Lieutenant Reagan, the platoon leader of the 3rd Platoon, an order suddenly came from the command channel of the platoon. All squads, assemble immediately at the place where we got off the bus. Have you found the Kel-morians? Asked a sergeant squad leader. We have found them, right next to Fort Howe. Reagan said, brothers, the Kel-morians have ripped our asses off. Less than a minute ago, the command center of Fort Howe sent a distress signal to all troops within a radius of 1,500 miles. An unknown number of Kel-morian troops are attacking the fortress. Which Kel-morian troops are the enemies? Augustus wanted to confirm Gravenhill's intelligence. Although his intelligence was outdated and did not bring much help to Augustus, the warning and precious pre-response time it brought were no longer there, but it also proved that the mercenaries' intelligence was trustworthy. Augustus did not take the stack of credit coins just now seriously. Before leaving Korhal, his mother gave him 3 Tarsinus Covington bank accounts in addition to 60,000 credit coins. Every month, Augustus' personal bank account would have an additional 500,000 to 1 million credits. From a longer term perspective, it would not hurt to get to know a future mercenary tycoon. Over the past few months, Augustus's letters to his mother have included more and more about the politics of Korhal IV and his father's career. In the end, Augustus convinced his mother that her son was worried about his father's revolutionary career and the future fate of Korhal. And Augustus was almost certain that, although his father Angus would not read every letter from his son, he would always ask about the content of the letter. Last week, in a triple encrypted email to Augustus that hid the sending address and sender information, his mother relayed Angus' words. Angus' attitude towards Augustus's worries was very clear. He stubbornly believed that forgetting history meant betrayal, the revolution would never stop, and Korhal must achieve independence in the hands of his generation. Angus also vaguely mentioned to Augustus the time of the independence referendum. Now it is no secret, the time is next year, that is, April 2489. The federal assassins should have infiltrated Korhal after that, and the turning point of the sudden change was also in this year. Augustus believed that, since Korhal's independence was a foregone conclusion, he must prepare for the upcoming assassination of his family and even the war between Korhal and the federal government. The enemy is the Seago Dragon Corps, a very famous mountain force that is also good at siege warfare. Reagan replied, they can be seen on almost every planet that is fighting. The Seago Dragons are recognized as the toughest bones to chew. The Seago Dragon Corps is one of the newest legions born out of the Kel-morian Ripper Corps system. Their base camp is on the mining world of Ferenus in the Kel-morian Federation. Compared with other planets suitable for life, Ferenus is too close to its sun, so that 90% of its water resources were evaporated in the early days of the formation of this planet, and the remaining water is buried deep underground. The red desert, rocky plains and high mountains that stretch across the surface of Ferenus form the vast main continental plate of this planet. Originally, Ferenus was just the most inconspicuous barren planet among the numerous planets in the Milky Way, but everything changed after the discovery of precious rare minerals. Kel-morian merchants, laborers, and mercenaries flocked to it, and new prosperous cities were built on the virgin land newly discovered by Kel-morian adventurers. Ferenus immediately became the most important mining world of the Moria Guild. The Sea Dragon Legion of Ferenus was formed by its local Ripper and militia after the invasion of the Terran Federation army. In the absence of support from other Kel-morian Federation planets, this hastily assembled army, in 2 years, took advantage of its familiarity with the terrain and gradually defeated a federal army group of about 50,000 people, and surrounded and annihilated the last battalion of the enemy on a plane called Sea Dragon. The Sea Dragon Legion will be formally established in this battle, and they vow to make the Terrans feel everything their ravaged homeland has experienced. Should we go back to support Fort Howe? At this time, the platoon leader and 4 squad leaders of the 3rd platoon had gathered together, and one of the squad leaders asked, but after all, we only have 1 platoon and less than 100 people. The squad leader of the 4th squad said, "What can we do if we go back? There are only 3 platoons in the fortress, and maybe it has fallen now. The fleet is on orbit. We can only hope that they will send airborne troops." Reagan actually didn't have any ideas when he couldn't contact Warfield. He was a person who was used to doing things according to the rules, and the same was true when leading troops in battle. Reagan has always been accustomed to obeying the orders of Captain Warfield, but once there was an unexpected change beyond the plan, he would be at a loss. The number of Sea Dragon troops attacking Fortress Howe cannot be too many, no more than 1 battalion at most. Augustus waved his hand behind him and said, "Jim, bring the map." Augustus began to assume that Fortress Howe was under attack when he heard Hill's intelligence. Based on this assumption, he made several preliminary plans in his mind. Under the gaze of others, Augustus half knelt on the ground and spread out a map covering Fortress Howe and all nearby cities, transportation routes and major highlands. The fleet and space station of Kel-morian and the synchronous orbit of Telesis II have been destroyed, which means that their forces on the surface of the planet will not receive any reinforcement from Moria, and only the Sea Dragon Legion is still active in this area. In nearly 3 years of war, the Sea Dragon Legion on Telesis has less than 2 of our armies. Under the light of the power armor searchlight, Augustus stretched out a hand and drew a straight line from the location of Fortress Howe on the map to the right with his index finger. To the east of Fort Howe is the Uranus Mountains, the largest in the hemisphere. The mountains are rich in crystal mineral veins, and the volcanoes are constantly spewing high-energy gas springs. The Seagallan Legion hollowed out several mountains there and built a magnificent underground fortress where most of the Legion soldiers are hiding. Augustus pointed to the Zulu outpost on the map. The Seagallan underground fortress is about 1,000 miles away from Fort Howe, at the exit of the only canyon in the Uranus Mountains that is accessible to vehicles, is a Zulu outpost. It was a nail that the first Marines drove into their doorstep, and it was a springboard for our army to advance on the Eastern Front. Chapter 52 Painted Blue. The main force of the Sea Dragon Corps cannot go out of the Uranus Mountains to raid the Howe Fortress under the nose of the Zulu outpost battle, and their transport aircraft group cannot hide from our satellite radar, Augustus said with great confidence. Although he was just an ordinary non-commissioned officer, his duty was nothing more than obeying the orders of his superiors and restraining his subordinates. However, in his spare time, in addition to reading books and playing cards, Augustus spent the rest of his time studying maps and using sand tables to deduce tactics, and he firmly believed that this would come in handy. The Sea Dragons wandering around the Howe Fortress are actually assault teams of 100 to 300 people, scattered over a vast area of about 2 million square miles. And all these troops added up are actually equivalent to a few thousand people in our brigade. So, I think the enemy we are about to face may only have a few hundred people or even less. They dare to attack the fortress with only a few hundred people. The squad leader of the first squad has been convinced by Augustus, but he still finds it incredible. The fortress-like outer wall of the Howe Fortress is made of cubic stones, with a thick layer of presteel plates embedded on the outside. The large caliber machine guns and rotating automatic electromagnetic machine gun turrets are enough to resist an infantry brigade. Those Kel-morians are indeed very brave, but there is definitely more than this that supports them to take risks. Augustus looked at everyone. There is a traitor. Renault was listening on the side. He was very smart and good at thinking about problems, and his tacit understanding with Augustus has been getting higher and higher over time. Pete, the hippie who drove the Gladiator transport plane, I knew it was him. Is it Jerome? He is always sneaky, and told me that he was stealing donuts. Is this reasonable? Lieutenant Justin. It can't be wrong. He said he was a sweet lover when he was eating FD individual rations. Everyone accepted it without hesitation and began to think about who the traitor was, but almost everyone's thoughts about the traitor were biased, and after talking for a long time, there were not many similar ones. Augustus, after all that, you should have a plan. Reagan looked at Augustus. I have a plan. Augustus said, of course, you are the one who gave the order in the end. Sly guy, you said all the good things. Do you think I have any other choice? Reagan shook his head. The nearest city to us is Oak Grove, less than 10 miles away. We will first meet up with the 2nd Battalion there, and then support Fort Howe. In comparison, although there are more troops stationed in Tavis East in the east, it will be dawn when we arrive. Augustus said, I know that the 2nd Battalion was transferred to Oak Grove 2 weeks ago, but I don't know if they are still there. If we can't get support from the 2nd Battalion, we will stop here. He drew a circle on the map. In addition to marking the main cities, the map also noted the landmark buildings and the most famous companies and factories in these cities. Green Automobile Factory? Reagan was puzzled. Repaint it. Augustus knocked on his power armor. Paint it the dark blue of the Sea Dragon. This is actually not difficult to understand, because after the Kel-morians seized the power armor from the Terran Federation, they also repainted it on the spot in their own automobile factory. You want us to disguise ourselves as Hagelang's men? Reagan was surprised by Augustus's risky plan. No, it's too dangerous. I knew you wouldn't agree. Augustus said, imagine the worst possibility. When we get there, Fort Howe has already fallen. We can sneak into the fortress before the enemy completely controls it. Another possibility is that Warfield's men are still holding their positions. We can attack from the rear and attack from both sides. Using conventional tactics, our chances of winning are pitiful. Only by breaking the routine can we achieve unexpected results. Opportunities always come with risks, and we must take this risk. He said, I have calculated that, even if we spend nearly an hour repainting at the car factory, we should still be the first reinforcement to arrive. At 8:44 p.m., the armored personnel carrier that Augustus was riding in arrived at Oak Forest. Oak Forest was originally a town built by loggers. Later, with the establishment of the railway network, the town became more prosperous because it was located at the hub of the transportation network. The commercial area, industrial area and residential area were gradually divided, and a vibrant and enterprising city emerged. When the third row arrived, most of the buildings in the city were dark, and only the police station, the maglev train station and the city government were still lit. Reagan and Augustus split into two groups, one to find the 2nd Battalion station, and the other to the Green Automobile Factory. The automobile factory was next to the Oak Forest train station. Before the war, this station was a transfer station for Fort Howe Western Crossroads. 12 two-way lanes once intersected here. Now, it has become a terminal. The top of the station is a reinforced steel frame vault, and the artificial light on the steel frame structure makes the station as bright as day. At first, no one responded from the high walls of the automobile factory, but under Augustus's order, Ward, a grenadier in his squad, immediately blew open the gate, and 2 Marine squad stepped on the broken iron fence and stepped into the factory. When a factory manager and several security guards slipped into the workshop like hamsters running along the corner, Augustus's men had already begun to adjust the painting equipment with ease. In the boot camp, it is a compulsory course to repaint or repaint your power armor. What really troubled Augustus was the winged emblem of the Sea Dragon. However, this problem was quickly solved by Li Pachiliang, an automotive engineer in the class, who had worked at Wolf Industries. Now it was just waiting for Reagan to bring back good news or bad news. When the factory manager carefully asked Augustus what he was doing, Augustus directly asked him to report a bank account where he could transfer money. After that, no one had any questions about it. I'm afraid we have to act alone. The 2nd Battalion is not here. There is only one garrison company in Oak Forest. They refuse to give up the city to help us. 10 minutes later, Reagan said in the communication channel, I'll be there soon. At 11 o'clock, a dark blue painted Marine Corps walked out of the factory. Their trucks were also modified and flew the Kel-morian flag. Half an hour later, the convoy entered the highway and headed for the Howe Fortress. The heavy snow had stopped, but the road conditions were very bad. Augustus estimated that they would return to the fortress in 2 hours. By then, they would disguise themselves as a small team of sea dragons coming to support. Thanks to Emperor Killing Demon Blade, Red-Haired Yama, Gallade, Donald John, Starry Night Sky, and Liu Zitan for their monthly tickets, and thanks to Kayanayu Zisheng, Donald John, and Khan for their awards. Chapter 53, The Throttle. July 19th, the highway from Oak Forest to Fort Howe. A layer of white frost condensed on the thorny shrubs of Tillersis on both sides of the road, which shone like crystals under the pale light of the headlights, like a work of art created by a master. In the deep darkness, hungry polar beasts roared in the distance, and the cold wind brought the smell of blood and gunpowder. The heavy armored personnel carrier of the first squad drove in the front, with a fluttering kilometer flag welded next to the right rear view mirror. Augustus was driving, and Lieutenant Reagan, the platoon leader of the third row, sat in the co-pilot. The container truck behind them was full of a squad of fully armed Marines. As the distance to Fort Howe got closer and closer, the craters on the road ahead gradually became more and more dense, and Augustus' armored personnel carrier sometimes had to carefully bypass several craters before it could continue to move forward. We are only a mile away from the first outpost of Fort Howe. Marines, be alert, Reagan said while looking at the navigation on the console in the communication channel of the whole platoon. Load the bullets. In the communication channel of his own squad, Augustus said a few words in a very calm voice. Augustus was responded by silence and neat clicks. In the calm waiting, everyone could feel their hearts beating. A mile of road is not long for the armored personnel carrier traveling at high speed. When Augustus and Reagan saw the first destroyed roadblock, the shadow of an outpost consisting of a steel tower, a semicircular bunker, and a cold gray circular wall slowly emerged beside the highway. We are passing through the 020 outpost. When the speed of the armored personnel carrier increased significantly, Reagan's voice rang again, and Augustus and others could clearly feel that his breathing was a little rapid. Augustus's armored personnel carrier sped past the outpost. Under the headlights, the walls of the outpost building gleamed due to the heat insulating coating on their surface, but as he had expected, the outpost was already empty. Some of the main buildings were still burning inside, but the flames were not easy to see. Keep going. The outpost is unguarded. The roadblock has been destroyed, and the road ahead is clear, Reagan said to the entire platoon. We have 20 minutes to reach Fort Howe. At this time, Augustus could clearly hear the roar of the Kel-morian's iconic large caliber mortars, and there were often bright momentary flashes of light. The road ahead was unexpectedly smooth, so Augustus accelerated all the way forward. He was about to pretend that a reinforcement was coming to support him quickly. Gradually, the outline of the towering hexagonal tower of Fort Howe became vaguely visible, and a high-pressure airlock door inlaid with spikes in front of Augustus was constantly enlarging in his eyes. There are 2 Kel-morian soldiers at the door, Reagan said. Do you want to stop and accept their questioning? In Augustus' eyes, the airlock door of the fortress suddenly opened, and 2 soldiers of the Sea Dragon Legion wearing dark blue power armor and black winged emblems on their chests were gesturing to Augustus' car to stop. The more you talk to them, the easier it will be to be exposed. Augustus rubbed the steering wheel. Second Lieutenant, my suggestion is, press the accelerator to the bottom. The 2 Sea Dragon soldiers were also very confused about the sudden appearance of the convoy, because they knew very well that there would be no other attacking forces tonight. Since the nearby Sea Dragon assault teams have all arrived, where did these troops with kilometer flags come from? But no matter what, they didn't dare to shoot at Augustus. What if they were really one of their own? They didn't dare to take responsibility. However, when Augustus' armored personnel carrier rushed towards them at an unimpeded speed, it was too late for the 2 Sea Dragon Legion soldiers to escape. In the sight of Augustus and Reagan, the 2 Seagallant soldiers seemed to have crashed into the car by themselves. They hung on the front windshield of the armored personnel carrier, with their helmets tightly pressed against it. A few seconds later, their feet were caught under the wheels, and their bodies disappeared in the blink of an eye. The armored personnel carrier weighing dozens of tons jumped and ran over their bodies. Another heavy armored personnel carrier followed closely behind and knocked the 2 unconscious soldiers out again. This time, they never got up again. Boss, your driving skills are really bad. You hit the trash can. Hannock asked in the channel of the first class. Wrong, it was 2 evil dragons. Augustus turned the steering wheel, and the armored personnel carrier immediately turned into another lane. At the end of this lane, the sound of gunfire became more and more intense, but except for the destroyed armored personnel carrier and the bodies of some Federal Marines, they had not encountered any enemy or their own troops for the time being. Where are you going? Reagan next to him turned his head to look at the road signs on the side of the road. Many street lights had been shattered, and the car was going fast, so he couldn't see it clearly. Officers' Wives Club, Wrestling and Fighting Training Ground. Dear Reagan, you perfectly avoided all the correct answers. Augustus' armored personnel carrier turned at an intersection, and then Reagan finally saw a new road sign. Parking platform. I thought we were going to the command center or the armory. Reagan said. These two places are definitely the Camaraderies' primary targets, Augustus said. It has been more than 6 hours since the attack on Fort Howe. The possibility that it has not been lost is very low. Moreover, our company's barracks are at the other end of the fortress, which is actually closer to the landing platform of equal strategic significance. Think about it. If Fort Howe is destined to be lost, what will Lieutenant Colonel Van Der Spoo do? If it is Captain Warfield, he will definitely choose to defend his position. Reagan said, but if it is Van Der Spoo, I think he will most likely escape. That's right, and if he wants to escape, he actually has only one choice left, that is to take a spaceship. Augustus' car drove over an upward ramp, and at this time, the vast landing platform was already in sight. About a dozen dark blue painted Hagelong Legion soldiers were on the road a few hundred yards away from Augustus, running towards the landing platform with their backs to him. In the distance, it was easy to see that two different troops were shooting at each other on the platform. An APD-33 transport plane capable of carrying 7 or 8 Marines rose from a barrage of spike bullets, its thrusters emitting 2 beams of dazzling blue light. The ship was quickly locked, and an anti-aircraft missile tower controlled by a soldier of the Seagolan Legion beside the landing platform fired a series of missiles before it rose into the sky. Almost instantly, with a thunderous roar, the transport ship exploded, and the fragments of the ship fell from the sky with flames, like blooming summer fireworks. Chapter 54, Saving Warfield. Slow down the other APCs, Augustus said to Reagan, while stepping on the brakes, making the heavy APC stop with a sharp and piercing brake sound. No one is allowed to shoot, unless I give the order. No one is allowed to shoot, unless Sergeant Augustus gives the order, Reagan said in the communication channel. You don't have to follow my instructions word for word. Augustus pulled the handbrake, and looked at Reagan sitting next to him. You are the commander. Everyone in this platoon now knows who is the one who made the plan. If I were to take charge, I would just charge. Reagan spread his hands. Well, that's what you said. Augustus got out of the car, closed the door, and said in the channel of the whole platoon, I'm Sergeant Augustus, this is the order. Get off the car and line up in a single column. My first squad is in front, the second squad is following the first squad, and the third and fourth squads are on the left and right rear respectively. At this moment, several armored personnel carriers in the back stopped steadily behind Augustus with a harsh brake sound. The dozen or so soldiers of the Sea Dragon Legion that they saw before had obviously noticed Augustus and were approaching here quickly, shouting something loudly, but they remained restrained and had not yet fired. After I give the order to shoot, the first and second squads will follow me to attack forward, and the third squad will attack from the left wing. Your targets are the enemy's mortars. The fourth squad is on the right wing. Your targets are the 2 anti-aircraft missile towers on the right side of the landing platform. Clear the obstacles for our possible airborne troops, and clean up the landing area, Augustus said. Do you understand? I only want one answer. Yes, sir. Augustus was satisfied with the unanimous answer. After the squads of the third row lined up behind Augustus, the Hagelong squad had already run in front of them. They came very close, stopping only 10 or 20 yards away, and Augustus swore that they would regret it. Stop, which assault squad are you from, and why are there no numbers on your armor? The leader asked Augustus. Among the dozen Hagelong soldiers, some pointed their guns at Augustus, while others were not so vigilant. This is a loophole, it could be fatal, but it is not necessary to panic because of it, Augustus thought. Under their gaze, Augustus did not answer, but just raised his right hand high, for Hagelong. Immediately, a uniform for Hagelong came from behind. Before setting off, Augustus and Reagan had practiced with the people in the platoon. Shouting slogans was not a difficult task for them. After all, they had to shout slogans every day in the boot camp. Unlike other Kel-morian troops, the Sea Dragon Legion was more like a large brotherhood. The bond that connected them was not the class system in the guild, but the brotherhood of life and death and the honor of the Legion. They regarded the Legion as a big family. Before joining the battle, they would always shout the word Sea Dragon. The leaders of all levels in the Legion had extremely high prestige among the grassroots soldiers. Although it was very strange, the shouting for Sea Dragon obviously paralyzed these soldiers, making them all immersed in their awakened sense of honor. Augustus took 4 or 5 steps forward and closed the distance with them. Reagan and the 1st and 2nd squads followed closely. When the Sea Dragon soldiers realized that something was wrong, it was already too late. In just 2 or 3 steps, Augustus had rushed to the side of the leader who had spoken before, aimed at his helmet, and pulled the trigger, and the bullets poured on the mad mask. This was a signal, and the Marines behind Augustus immediately rushed towards the Sea Dragon Legion soldiers, with 2 firebats and the platoon in front. The firebat armor during the Kel-morian War was far less sturdy than the CMC 660 more than a decade later, but the armor plate of the CMC 230XF was still much thicker than the power armor type 200 worn by Augustus, so their armor could more easily withstand the enemy's small caliber bullets and even grenades. The scorching plasma stream poured out of Hanuk's flamethrower and immediately set a Sea Dragon soldier on fire, turning the dark blue armor into a red frying pan. Watching the enemy jumping around in the flames, he let out a loud evil laugh. Hanuk knew that the enemy would definitely regard him as a Balrog, a demon crawling out of hell, but that was exactly what he wanted. The Federal Marines and the Sea Corps soldiers exchanged fire at very close range, holding electromagnetic rifles and firing at each other only a few yards apart, but the Federal heavy machine gunners and firebats had the upper hand in this close-range confrontation. Pachinyang from Augustus's squad replaced Benjamin as the heavy machine gunner. Although he was not as tall as Benjamin, his strength was not inferior. When Pachinyang raised the Honey Whisper heavy machine gun and fired at close range, even the CMC power armor could not withstand it. In just a dozen seconds, he swept down 2 enemy soldiers. With a roar, the leader of the Sea squad rushed at Augustus like a bull, knocking him to the ground with the bullets fired from his rifle. Augustus was just a new recruit after all, and his attainments in close combat were not bad, but he was still not as good as a Sea veteran who was proficient in this field. The Sea Dragons are a mountain troop that is good at fighting in the mountains. Fighting on the high mountains in the polar environment is also their strength. The strong individual quality and indomitable will are the foundation of this troop's fame in the world of the Terran Federation. However, Augustus still has companions. Raynor, Zander, and Kielovsky behind him immediately ran to their squad leader, but the first one to arrive was Titus. He first kicked the leader away, then jumped at the other party, and his heavy body like a brown bear pressed heavily on the other party. Augustus got up from the ground, swung the Gauss rifle, and smashed the helmet of the Sea Dragon leader with the butt. This blow was far from fatal, and the other party's helmet was intact. Titus, hold him down. With a low curse, Augustus knelt on one knee, found the button on the leader's helmet, and opened his mask. Finally, in the other party's terrified and desperate eyes, Augustus swung the rifle heavily again. This time, blood splattered. Say, Sergeant, hasn't anyone told you that you're so ruthless? Titus stood up and stared at Augustus with wide eyes, as if he had just met him for the first time. I won't be able to sleep or eat until I've smashed all the enemy's heads. Augustus turned to the other side. Reagan, have you contacted Warfield on the command channel? At this time, the enemies had been eliminated, and their bodies were lying in the middle of the road, and this location was 1,000 yards away from the landing platform where the fire was taking place. I heard his voice. Reagan said, the captain used the hangar of the landing platform to build a defensive position. He has less than 30 men left, but he confirmed that there will be no more than 100 Kel-morian soldiers facing them. He asked me how many troops I had come to support. Tell Warfield that I brought a battalion. Augustus replied, tell him to hold on, I'll take people to rescue him now. Thank Donald John. Glory to the eldest son, Bayan Guan, Chiakumingai, and the monthly ticket of the unkillable little hero. Thanks to Agent Ranrong, Command Lush for the reward. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 55. Who is the team leader? It was nearly 3 in the morning, and thick cumulonimbus clouds blocked the light of the 3 satellites of Telesis II. The power supply of most areas of the Howe fortress had been cut off, and the lights on the landing platform had been extinguished, except for the dense and continuous flames of Gauss rifles, the flash points of explosions, and the ice blue flames of electromagnetic grenades. Augustus could hardly see the specific battle situation on the platform. Follow my original order, Squad 1 and Squad 2, follow me. Augustus ordered. We must disguise ourselves as a Hageland team rushing to support, and try to get as close to the enemy as possible without firing a shot, and then blend in. When they find that friendly forces are actually shooting at them, they will definitely fall into confusion. Turn off the color recognition function on your mask HUD, and enable the radio reply recognition in the built-in computer of the armor, he said. Reagan, tell Warfield our plan and let them prepare for the front and back attack. After receiving a positive answer, Augustus led 2 squads of 25 people to run along the road. Augustus and Reagan ran in the front, and behind them were the people of the first squad. Instead of hiding themselves, they turned on the searchlights on the breastplates of their power armor and walked straight onto the asphalt runway of the landing platform. During this time, Augustus encountered 2 soldiers of the Sea Dragon Legion who were carrying the wounded and passed by them. Neither side spoke. At this time, no one asked them which unit they were from. More than one retreating Sea Dragon Legion soldier encountered them, but these exhausted soldiers took them for granted as reinforcement. The landing platform was full of electromagnetic rifle fire. The platform was very large, with several liftable platforms leading to the underground hangar. The wreckage of the destroyed spacecraft was scattered at Augustus' feet. There was only one hangar on the ground, which was originally used to temporarily house small and medium-sized near-ground spacecraft. It was located in the northeast corner of the landing platform, and was also the place where the most intense fighting took place. Augustus led his marines straight to the surface hangar. On the way, they stepped over at least hundreds of bodies of Federation and Kel-morian soldiers. Most of the bodies were intact, even the helmets were intact, and the cause of death could not be seen. It is not easy to penetrate the power armor, but as long as a spike or shrapnel penetrates this iron armor, it will be fatal. Among these corpses, most of them are non-combatants in the fortress. When the fortress was attacked, they hastily picked up rifles and blocked the enemy with the marines. There were very few survivors. Augustus's troops advanced at the fastest running speed they could reach, and soon passed through the southern and central parts of the landing platform. They could clearly see the flat rectangular outline of the surface hangar and the 3 circular defense positions surrounded by heavy armored vehicles and transport ships of Warfield's troops. When Augustus rushed to the outside of the hangar, a commando unit of Hageland with less than 50 people left had captured the 2 outermost positions and was jumping out of the bunker to launch a fierce attack on the last position. Warfield's federal soldiers used heavy machine guns and flamethrowers to shoot at the enemy. They obviously had little ammunition left, so their shooting intervals were very long. The soldiers of the Sea Dragon Legion had already occupied the arsenal of the Howe fortress, so ammunition supply was not a problem for them at all. Obviously, it was only a matter of time before Warfield was defeated. Follow me. Augustus took the lead and climbed onto an overturned armored vehicle and jumped between the first and second lines of defense. Several wounded soldiers of the Sea Dragon Legion were leaning weakly on the trucks or spaceships that served as shelters on the second line of defense, waiting for others to send them out of the battlefield. You are finally here. A wounded soldier with a broken leg said weakly. Don't worry about us. Kill those federal bastards. For the Sea Dragons. In response to them, Augustus clenched his fist and shouted the slogan of the Legion. Then the wounded felt that they had already won and cheered. Captain Oleg, our reinforcements are here. One of the wounded said excitedly in their communication channel. There were 2 assault teams of the Sea Dragon Legion attacking the Howe fortress, with a total of more than 500 people. After several hours of brutal fighting, they had lost more than half of their troops. The other assault team captured the last fortress tower that had not been lost at the other end of the Howe fortress. The wounded obviously mistook Augustus's troops for them. It was dark at this time, and it was difficult for them to find the difference between the paint on Augustus's armor and their own. Each of the Sea Dragon Legion's assault teams had white spray paint representing their numbers on their shoulder armor. This was a major mistake made by Augustus, but the light was dim at this time, and it was difficult for the wounded to notice the difference. Even if someone saw it, at most they would only be confused in their hearts, and would not even think about someone pretending to be someone. There have been examples of federal troops disguising themselves as Kel-morian rippers before. After all, their power armor is not much different, and they can be faked by just changing the paint. The Kel-morians themselves have done this a lot. But generally speaking, as long as the two sides talk, it is easy to be exposed. In the early days of the establishment of the Terran Federation, it was a relatively free and loose confederation regime, while the original Moria people advocated adventure and gold panning, and maintained social stability with family blood. The cultural differences between the Terran Federation and the Kel-morian Federation will indirectly affect their way of thinking and speaking habits. As long as the other party has doubts, a few questions can expose the imposter. Yes, your savior is here, Raynor said jokingly in the First Shift's channel. I'm so happy for them. Ty just said. Augustus no longer paid attention to the wounded. He turned over through the landing gear and climbed onto a turbine transport ship that formed the second line of defense. At this time, he could see that dozens of Sea Dragon Legion soldiers had occupied the third line of defense and used it as a cover to shoot at the hangar surrounded by the defense line, and the federal soldiers in the hangar no longer fought back. Augustus jumped off the transport ship and ran to the Sea Dragon Legion soldiers in front of the third line of defense with the Gauss rifle in his hand. He was not in a hurry, and his steps were steady and powerful, as if he knew that his support would be the final victory for his side. You've arrived just in time. A soldier of the Sea Dragon Legion, who was shooting between the bunkers, turned around to look at them. Due to the angle of view and the light, he did not notice that the power armor of this reinforcement was much neater and brighter due to the repainting. Augustus ran quickly between them, and the Marines behind him walked to each bunker, walked to the side of the Sea Dragon Legion soldiers, and put their guns between the bunkers. Who is the leader? Then, Augustus shouted loudly. Although he was confused, the leader of the assault team, Captain Oleg, turned around and answered, I'm Oleg Benson, I request. The next second, the helmet of the leader of the assault team was hit by the boatswain sniper rifle of Rick, the sniper in Augustus's squad, and a .50 caliber armor-piercing bullet pierced his helmet. Chapter 56 Alpha Squadron. For nearly a second, the soldiers of the Sea Dragon Legion who were turning their heads to look at Augustus were stunned. The other soldiers who were still firing at the hangar did not notice the difference in the gunshots until they heard gunshots around them, and their brothers began to roar. For a moment, the Sea Dragon Legion soldiers were at a loss and did not know where the enemy came from. It was late at night, and the light and shadows intertwined. They were all Marines painted in dark blue. It looked like someone among them had gone crazy and wanted to kill everyone without distinguishing between friend and foe. They looked blankly at a Sea Dragon Legion soldier holding a heavy machine gun and shooting at his brother's mask at close range until the other's helmet was broken. What are you doing? Are you crazy? They betrayed the Sea Dragon. Who should we shoot at? The enemy was right next to them. The Sea Dragon's channel was in chaos. In just a dozen seconds, blood was flowing in front of the bunker of the third line of defense. There are no numbers on their shoulders. When more than 20 soldiers of the Sea Dragon Legion were lying on the ground, someone discovered the difference between Augustus and his men on their own side. But it was not daytime now, and if they wanted to confirm, they had to use the searchlight on the Gauss rifle or other light sources. Often, they would be knocked down by grenades from behind before they could see clearly whether they were enemies or friends. The battle happened in a flash, and the first solution that the Sea Dragons thought of was to fire flares instead of changing the recognition mode of the power armor. This meant that, when the first flare was launched into the air, too many of their brothers had fallen. In the chaos, the HUD display on Augustus's mask could clearly indicate enemies and friends. The built-in computer inside his power armor could send an inquiry signal to other armors in the platoon through the communication system. After receiving the response signal, it would immediately identify the power armor as a friendly force and mark the Marines wearing these power armors in red. Augustus held the Gauss rifle in his hand and fired at a Seago Dragon Legion soldier who was rushing towards him, while Renault fought side by side with him back to back. The soldier in front of him was tall, and his modified power armor was comparable to the larger Firebit armor, but one of his hands had been blown off by an electromagnetic grenade, and the remaining hand only held an old-fashioned revolver. In silence, Augustus aimed at the opponent's helmet and shot. The laser rangefinder on the electromagnetic rifle showed that the enemy was approaching him as fast as a mad bull. Suddenly, a spike bounced upward, after hitting his breastplate, drilled into the seam between his helmet and breastplate, and pierced the soldier's head from the bottom to the top of his chin. When Augustus turned to the other side, he saw Ward's missile hit a soldier of the Seago Legion, smashing him into pieces. At this time, Warfield's Federal soldiers came late, and the silver-gray painted Marines jumped down from the bunker next to Augustus. Due to the lack of bullets, they fought with the Seago Legion soldiers in close combat, threw them to the ground, and used fists, gun butts and any weapons they could find to smash the enemy's helmet. Because they also changed the identification mode, they did not accidentally hit friendly forces. Augustus, I really didn't expect you to be the first one to come. Warfield jumped off an armored vehicle. We rushed here as soon as we received the news, Captain. Augustus threw a rifle magazine full of bullets to Warfield. I heard that you brought a battalion. Kit, where are they now? Warfield changed the magazine neatly, and with a crisp click, he asked Augustus. Each of these bad guys I brought can fight 10 of us. Augustus said. I didn't expect it. Warfield then shouted and ran to the other side, and 4 or 5 Marines followed him closely. Thank God, we are saved. At this time, another Marine jumped down and walked in front of Augustus. Augustus remembered this voice. It was the acting Lieutenant Colonel Van der Spoo he saw in the command center. Van der Spoo's power armor was brand new and shiny, obviously well maintained, with a special person to maintain it every day, oiling and polishing it. Augustus even suspected that, if Van der Spoo was not participating in a real battle, but attending a military parade, he would definitely hang medals and flowers on his majestic and shining armor. Lieutenant Colonel, the battle is not over yet. The armory, engineering station, command center, we still have many places to recapture. Augustus reminded him. Now we have a battalion, and there will be more soon. Van der Spoo looked at Augustus dissatisfiedly. Since the lieutenant colonel did not take the sergeant who only said 2 words to heart, he could not recognize Augustus just by his voice. The battle is over. Those damned sea dragons will pay the price in blood. Van der Spoo said forcefully. His words did not hide his hatred for the Sea Dragon Legion. Augustus said in the interval between changing the magazine, I think I need to remind you that the battalion is still on the way. If Augustus said that he brought a platoon, Warfield would just let him get out immediately. If he had brought a battalion of reinforcement, the result would have been completely different. The remaining Federal soldiers would have sworn to hold their positions for the coming dawn, and Augustus's troops would not have rushed into a lost position and fallen into danger. How far are they from arriving? Van der Spoo's expression of anger and hatred under his mask suddenly disappeared, and he looked in the direction he came from, as if he wanted to return to the hangar. Anytime. Augustus turned and left after saying this. He had to return to his troops immediately, and had no time to talk to Van der Spoo. At 4 o'clock in the morning, Augustus and Warfield's troops wiped out a Hagelang Legion assault team and recaptured the landing platform. But compared to the entire Howe fortress, this was really a drop in the bucket. At 4:40 in the morning, good news finally came. The Alpha Squadron, which was stationed in the synchronous orbit of Tillises, sent out several assault ships, and the transport ships that landed on the landing platform brought 2 companies of airborne troops. Alpha Squadron is a unit of white power armored soldiers known as Blood Eagles by the Kel-morians and their fellow Terrans. Throughout the Federation military system, Alpha Squadron is known for their savage charges and cold cruelty. Leading this unit is Major Edmund Duke of Alpha Squadron, whom Augustus and Warfield met on the landing platform. Thanks to Zarastad and Book Friend 201711201923342009 for their monthly tickets. Thanks to Air and Command Lush for their awards. Chapter 57 Edmund Duke. On the landing area temporarily cleared by the parking platform of the Howe Fortress, an Apod 33 Gladiator transport ship landed on the asphalt runway with bloodstains under the guidance of the signal light. The engine thrusters switched to vertical state, raising a wave of hot air with the smell of ozone. The frost condensed on the stabilizer wing at the rear of the transporter melted immediately, and the white steam was quickly blown away by the cold wind at dawn of the Tullius second. A team of airborne troops wearing white power armor lined up from the lowered gangway, and their commander Major Redmond Duke walked at the end. Immediately afterwards, a pure white Goliath-armed robot was walking out of the belly compartment entrance of a transport plane. 33rd Assault Division. Oh, old acquaintance, this is not the first time we meet, Horace Warfield. The last time I saw you in Onyaru Sigma, you were still Mengsk's third-class soldier. Major Duke did not issue an attack order, but walked towards Warfield calmly. At this time, Augustus was standing behind Warfield, just like his adjutant. Major Duke was a big man with broad shoulders and a strong back. The heavy and solid power armor wrapped around him made him look even taller and more sturdy. The major walked briskly, but when he swung his two strong arms vigorously, his walking posture looked more like an angry silverback gorilla than a heroic federal officer. It's not easy to be a fire captain. Without Alpha Squadron to change your diapers, you will lie in the crib and cry. Duke's helmet mask slowly moved up, revealing a wrinkled and thin face with deep eye sockets and a narrow chin with thin lips under the prominent diamond-shaped cheekbones. What's the matter with the Marine behind you? Is that a sea dragon? Duke soon discovered that there was something wrong with Augustus' armor paint. No, they are all genuine federal soldiers, and I don't need to explain the whole story to you. Warfield didn't give Duke a good look, and didn't even take off his mask. Long time no see. The famous Major Redmond Duke, only 40 years old, is already a rising star in the Duke family of Tassinus. It is said that Duke of Alpha Squadron is victorious in every battle, and he has more medals and awards than any active general. But when you were on planet Sigma, your troops were defeated all the time. Warfield said. 3 years ago, you and Arcturus were both second lieutenants. Now, he is a colonel. Nonsense. How can the promotion system of the fleet and the Marine Corps be the same? That's it. I won't argue with you. There is nothing to talk about between us. Major Duke's nose was crooked with anger. He no longer cared about the paint on Augustus's armor. My troops will be in battle soon. Where are your people? We must retake this fortress. It's urgent. That year, I subdued 2 terrorists in Norlander with one hand. Then, thugs 10 times my size surrounded me, each holding a shotgun. Then, Duke, who was embarrassed, began to brag about his early military achievements when he served in the Marine Corps. I remember the 5 you mentioned last time. Warfield frowned. That time was on a satellite of the A1977 marsh gas planet. You are talking about Norlander. You remembered it wrong. Duke had a blank expression on his face. He originally came to bury Warfield, but it didn't seem to go well. Warfield didn't want to listen to Duke's bragging anymore. Now let's talk business. My people have recaptured the landing platform of Fort Howe, but the rest of the area has fallen into the hands of the Sea Dragon Legion. My people captured several prisoners, and learned that there are about 200 Sea Dragon Legion soldiers in this fortress. Aside from the wounded, there are even fewer of them who can continue to fight. This is my attack plan. Warfield continued. Fort Howe is divided into 5 different areas. We should recapture the command center first. Enough. I don't have time to listen to your long speech here. Duke crossed his arms in front of his chest, his eyes squinting. Who do you think you are? Those nonsense clowns in the general staff? In my opinion, there is only one way to win, and that is to move forward courageously. When Augustus looked at him, the arrogance on the face of the Alpha Squadron Major was obvious. The Federal Army is an army from hell, and I have proved countless times that the Kel-morians are nothing but cowards, a group of country bumpkins who stick their butts out in the mud to dig for shiny stones. Any useless strategic deployment is just a waste of time. We have 2 airborne companies and 4 Goliath-armed robots. We don't even have to plan the route before crushing a group of ants. Go forward. Crush everyone who blocks the way, and kill every Kel-morian. Alpha Squadron does not accept surrender, and does not need prisoners. Duke said impatiently. Warfield, if you are afraid, you can stay where you are with your Marines. My men got out of bed at 3 in the morning, and they didn't even have a sip of hot coffee before they had to run to this snowy hellhole to clean up your mess. If we are lucky, we can get a quick victory and go back to sleep. Alpha Squadron, assemble. He ordered immediately. Sailors, what is our slogan? First to fight, first to retreat. We are the Blood Eagles. With the sound of the servo motor turning, Duke's mask closed. He led Alpha Squadron to the east along the road that Augustus came from. This army of several hundred people was so powerful that it disappeared from the eyes of Augustus and Warfield in a short while. Is he always so confident? Augustus asked Warfield, standing in place and watching Alpha Squadron go away. Edmund has always been like this. His irrational battle plan has caused him a lot of suffering, but he still goes his own way. Your brother and I have known him since we were still on Sigma. Warfield said. What kind of person do you think he is? Arrogant, rude, and cruel. Augustus replied. He is very good at judging people. Warfield turned his head to look at him. What does Arcturus think of him? Augustus asked. Well, a gorilla that is always rampaging in his own little jungle and is always in a state of anger because of his small brain capacity. Warfield said. That's right. Augustus nodded in agreement. The metaphors of the Mengsk family are always magical. Warfield seemed to see the shadow of Arcturus in Augustus. They have many similarities, but they are completely different in nature. Okay, little Mengsk, we should catch up with them. We can wait a little longer, Augustus said. Duke is eager to win and is determined to take risks. Let Alpha Squadron go to the front. Chapter 58. Who is the traitor? Next, Augustus and Warfield took out the internal map of the How Fortress to discuss the next plan, while the remaining members of the first company gathered around and listened to their conversation. Unconsciously, Warfield had already regarded Augustus as his deputy. Except for the third row, his platoon leader and squad leader now only had 3 people left. Although Alpha Squadron is not good at fighting, its fighting style has always been known for its toughness and roughness. Regardless, they are indeed a very elite force. They should be able to recapture most of the important facilities and buildings in this fortress soon. Augustus said. But Duke's troops lack goals and are just rushing around in the fortress. A difficult tower will take them a lot of time. That's right, and we have to take back the armory first. We can't let the Kel-morians empty it. Warfield said. Gather, brothers of the first company, we still have a tough battle to fight. Find some armored personnel carriers that can still be driven. Although the soldiers of this company had been fighting nervously for a whole night and were very tired, they still obeyed Warfield's orders and relined in front of him, checking their weapons and waiting for orders. Reagan, the platoon leader of the 3rd platoon, took his men to find the car the company commander asked for. I've been to the armory, where brand new sets of CMC 300 power armor are hung on the walls, and boxes of shotgun 20 load ammunition and piercer rifle bullets are on the ground. There are about 2 truckloads of palm-sized spider sensing mines imported from Kel-morian. They are high-end products and are said to be able to automatically identify the identity of the enemy and effectively avoid accidental injuries. Augustus said, if we can keep an eye on or retrieve this batch of supplies, I dare say that the people in the military affairs department will definitely rush to award us medals. Kel-morian. Why do I remember that the Kel-morian people stand on the side of the Kel-morian Combine? Renault said in the communication channel of Class 1, have they not been condemning the Terran Federation's shameless invasion of Kel-morian in their own local media? To make money. Ty just said, who would complain about little money? Let's go. By the time we arrive at the armory, Edmund's people may have driven the Sea Dragon Legion out of Fortress How. Warfield said. By the way, where is Van der Sper? Augustus looked at the Marines and didn't see Lieutenant Colonel Van der Sper's power armor, which was still shiny and bright even after a night of hard fighting. Has anyone seen him? The Marines looked at each other. That coward Van der Sper only hid behind us during the battle and let his men take the bullets. He is a coward. Now, he must be hiding in a corner and shivering. A surviving Marine in the first row said loudly, and the other Marines who were deeply touched immediately laughed loudly. Who can guarantee me that Van der Sper must be hiding in his comfortable tortoise shell and shivering now? Augustus' stern questioning immediately subsided the laughter. No one. This is very wrong. Augustus said with a serious expression. Runstein, you know Take everyone from the 3rd Fire Group and bring an extra heavy machine gun. Go to the hangar on the ground to find Van der Spoo. If you can't find him, search the entire landing platform and then report to me using the radio. Understood? Without any questions, Runstein immediately did as he was told. Get in the car. Warfield immediately gave the order, and dozens of Marines immediately boarded several armored personnel carriers driven by Reagan and drove towards the armory. Why do you think Van der Spoo is up to something? Warfield's armored personnel carrier was in the front, and he was the one driving this time, while Augustus sat in the co-pilot. The Sea Dragons attacked the outpost silently, and then passed through the fortress gate easily, as if it was undefended. When I learned that the enemy was about to reach the company camp, I ran into Van der Spoo on the landing platform, who was about to flee. He abandoned the command center and handed over the most heavily defended place in the fortress. I always knew that he was a hypocritical coward, but he ran too fast. Van der Spoo just sent his only battalion to a deserted city ruins 2 weeks ago. This is the real reason why the defense of Howe Fortress is empty. And yesterday, he dispatched a platoon to explore the Kel-morian troops in Meridian before the Sea Dragons were about to launch an attack. This is definitely not a coincidence. I suspect that Van der Spoo has defected to the Kel-morian people. Augustus said. The situation is becoming clearer and clearer now. Everyone knows that the Kel-morian will be defeated sooner or later. What is Van der Spoo trying to do? Said Warfield. I don't know. Money or something else that is worth a human selling his soul. Augustus shook his head and said. He won't be able to get away for long. Warfield laughed. He has revealed too many flaws. The Security Bureau will find him soon. Warfield didn't drive for long. There are direct roads from the landing platform to important facilities such as the armory and the command center. At 5 o'clock in the morning, they drove to a 2-lane road outside the armory that led to the command center and headed west. There's a car in front. Augustus' eyes were sharp. He saw a heavy truck driving out of the main gate of the armory, only 300 or 400 yards away from them. The other party also saw the rumbling armored personnel carrier convoy and immediately turned north and turned into a road leading to the fortress gate. I'll go after that vehicle and you guys go take down the armory, Warfield said on the 1st Company's public communication channel. Reagan, the 3rd platoon leader, is in charge of this operation. After that, Warfield's armored personnel carrier made a beautiful wide-angle turn and accelerated toward the truck. The Marines of the 1st Squad in the cargo bed of the personnel carrier could not help but complain. The heavy truck was obviously fully loaded with cargo, and it never left the armored personnel carrier behind, with a gap of only 5 body lengths. See if you can blow up his tires, Warfield said. Augustus opened the door and shot at the truck, but he couldn't find a good angle to aim, and only shot a series of sparks on the alloy bed of the truck. This thrilling chase did not last long. Although Augustus failed to hit his target, the gunshots also put great pressure on the other party. The driver of the truck made a fatal mistake and drove into a dead end. This dead end was unobstructed on the navigation system, but now it was blocked by a broken down Kel-morian tank. The truck was forced to stop, and Augustus led the 1st Squad of Marines to surround it. Put your hands up, sir, or we will shoot, Warfield shouted. But when the driver got out of the car, everyone was shocked. You may have many reasons to excuse yourself, Lieutenant Colonel J.V. Van der Spoo, Augustus said. But stealing federal military supplies is illegal. Thanks to QWQ, BZ's monthly tickets. Thanks to Command-LSH, Book Friend 150,105,153,217,605, and Agent Rang for their awards. Thanks for the recommendation tickets and investment. Chapter 59, Promotion to Sergeant. July 25th, Augustus was wearing a white double-layer silk parka that reached his knees, clearing the snow at the entrance of the number 7 supply station. Next to him was Renault, who was also dressed in the same outfit. The fur on the edge of the coat's hood was causing him to sneeze continuously. On this day, the Howe Fortress was as busy as ever. Every few minutes, a military bus full of workers or a huge space engineering construction vehicle drove past the supply station, rushing to repair the defense facilities and buildings destroyed by the Sea Dragon Legion, or filling the roads full of craters, and collecting all the wreckage of the tanks and the bodies of the Marines. The Sea Dragon Legion knew that it could not defend the fortress, so it destroyed it wantonly, which required the workers to work for another week to repair the fortress. Most of these workers came from the two small towns around the How fortress and the nearest city, while the Marines who made great contributions to defending the fortress were given a few days of rare vacation. Therefore, the idle soldiers either played cards all day in the barracks, or indulged themselves in the bar district near the fortress. Only one person in Augustus's squad was injured in this battle. The unfortunate unlucky guy was Harnack, who burned his hands due to his carelessness when using the Hellfire flamethrower. It was cold and windy in the fortress that afternoon. At 1500 hours, Augustus and Raynor put down their brooms and took a fortress bus to the command center. Warfield had just called Augustus' personal terminal and asked them to find him at the command center. Along the way, Augustus saw many workers who were laying lines and repairing roads. On the night of the 18th, the How fortress suffered heavy losses, and the military had to recruit additional workers. At that time, there was still an engineering battalion left in the fortress, but only a few people survived the catastrophe. Under Vanderspoe's order, all civilian staff, engineers, and mechanics were forced to take up arms, but they only delayed the attack speed of the Sea Dragon Legion. When the bus arrived at the door of the command center, Augustus found that the soldiers on guard had been replaced by 2 Marines from the 3rd row of the 1st Company. After seeing Augustus, they immediately saluted to show respect. "Does that guy Vanderspoe want to reminisce with us?" On the way to the top of the command center, Renault was in a good mood. In nearly a month, he finally got out of the haze of losing Tom Ormo. For a few days, Renault learned to drink to relieve his sorrow, and Augustus ordered the whole class to supervise Renault and not allow him to drink excessively. For this reason, the two had a small conflict, but Renault soon regretted it and decided not to let decadence easily devour himself in the future. "Then we have to go to the prison to find him." Augustus also smiled. In the command center, Augustus didn't even see a few Marines or civilian staff, which also explains why Warfield had to do everything himself. Vanderspoel's office has now been changed to Warfield's last name. "You got promoted?" As soon as he entered the door, Augustus noticed the rank badge worn by Warfield, Major Warfield. "Yes, it's just a matter of course. I should have received this golden flower." Most of the time, Warfield is a serious person, but at ordinary times, he doesn't mind joking with his subordinates in private. "So, this fortress is under your control now?" Augustus and Renault sat down on the first sofa in the office. "Where is that arrogant Major Duke?" "Edmund has returned to his fleet in synchronous orbit. The people of the Sea Dragon Legion have long since fled, but he thought he had a great victory, and is still complacent." Warfield said, "Well, Fortress How is under my control for the time being before they send another lieutenant colonel to replace me. That means they have found out something. I want to know what Vanderspoe is thinking?" Augustus asked. "He's totally asking for trouble." Warfield shook his head and said, "The Federation's secret police only had to use some tricks to make him confess everything. The arsenal at Fort Howe is filled with the most expensive munitions in the entire Northern Hemisphere theater. The upgrades for weapons and power armor alone are worth 8 million credits. This money is enough for Vanderspoe to live comfortably for the rest of his life in some remote colony, but he's not sure he can steal a batch of documented military supplies without anyone noticing. So he found the Kel-morians?" Renault said, "If this batch of supplies was stolen, no one would know its source." Vanderspoe's calculations were very good. In his plan, the Sea Dragon Legion will send an assault team of about 200 people to attack Fort Howe with his support. They will transfer a batch of military supplies in the shortest time possible. Finally, he will lead the Federal Army to drive them out. Good calculations. Augustus smiled. Then he miscalculated that step. The Kel-morians won't keep his word. They sent 2 elite assault teams and an ice ranger. Warfield, they want to empty the entire Howe fortress and take Vanderspoe's head as a reward. When the situation is completely out of Vanderspoe's control, he knows he's done. He said. But as long as Vanderspoe transports a truck full of CMC-300 reactor cores to the private airport built by smugglers and gangsters, he can make a fortune. Does this mean that our contribution is actually much greater than we thought? Renault asked. That's why I came to you. Warfield said, you have made a great contribution. Can I become an official too? Renault seemed very happy. He didn't know what contribution he had made. Most of the time, he obeyed Augustus' orders. "Now you are a lance corporal, in charge of commanding the first squad," said Warfield. As for Augustus, he has been promoted to staff sergeant. At the same time, he will receive a Silver Cross and a Marine Corps Anchor Badge of Honor. As he spoke, Warfield opened the drawer of his desk and threw several badges accurately into the hands of Augustus and Renault. "We are short of manpower, so the commissioning ceremony can be omitted. The first company suffered heavy losses. Except for the 3rd platoon, the other 3 platoons are almost considered to have been disbanded." At this point, Warfield's face showed a bit of sadness. "A new batch of recruits just arrived at the fortress yesterday. Now, I need Reagan to command the 1st platoon, and the 3rd platoon will be temporarily handed over to you, Augustus. After you are promoted to lieutenant, I will transfer you to other platoons. The 3rd platoon is good." Augustus put away the badge. "Why is the recruitment so fast this time?" "Because most of them are resocialized soldiers," Warfield said. "I heard that resocialized factories are being built in full swing on many planets within the Federation. Soon there won't be enough criminals." Chapter 60, Kel-morian Internment Camp 34. July 27. Augustus's 3rd platoon assembled on time at the military camp's playground. After their new platoon leader carefully checked whether everyone's clothes were clean and tidy and met the standards of hygiene and military appearance, the 44 Marines in the platoon, dressed in winter uniforms, boarded 2 buses to the Fortress Opera House. "I didn't know there was a children's play at the Opera House today." Ty just was sitting opposite Augustus Mengsk. "The only thing I want to do is kick the ridiculous ass of those actors because they are wasting my precious time. Come to think of it, I fell asleep last time." Harnack said embarrassedly. "It's not my fault. I thought it was a sexy consolation performance. I think the epic opera depicting the galactic hero Ender is very exciting." No one agreed with Runstein's opinion. "I got the news that this should be a speech," Augustus said. "Fortunately, I brought a pillow and a blanket." Josephine's words caused a burst of laughter. "Okay, I'll take you to the bars in the town of How tonight." Augustus looked at them and said. "Great." Harnack shouted. "I'm not sleepy when it comes to this." When the bus stopped at the not so spacious entrance in front of the Fortress Opera House, the 3rd row got off the bus and lined up at the door, because Augustus always required them to line up neatly. An assistant sergeant with short brown hair was standing at the door waiting for them. She had brown curly hair, big blue eyes and rosy lips. The tight military uniform outlined her slim figure. "Sergeant Mengsk." The sergeant walked straight to Augustus with a stack of document bags in his arms. "You can let your soldiers in. Is Major Warfield here?" Augustus waved his hand to let his men enter the Opera House. "He said he'll be here soon." The sergeant replied. "Do you know who is giving the speech and what the content is?" Augustus looked at her. "I don't know." "Sergeant, do you mind if I save your personal terminal email account?" The assistant sergeant was much shorter than Augustus, so when Augustus looked down at her, he could not avoid looking into her charming eyes. "Of course, I don't mind." Augustus was wearing a belted military uniform with a stand-up collar and a wide-brimmed military cap with the anchor badge he had just received. His military temperament added a lot to Augustus's handsome appearance, making him more likely to attract the attention of the opposite sex. So, the female sergeant suddenly became shy and bit her beautiful red lips. "Mengsk, the speech is about to begin." At this time, a strong hand was placed on Augustus' shoulder. Augustus looked back and saw that it was Warfield. After smiling apologetically, the two of them walked towards the Opera House together. "Did I disturb you?" Warfield whispered. "No," Augustus replied. "You are always so popular," Warfield said. "This is true," Augustus said. The Opera House in Fort Howard was not very big and could only accommodate 300 people at most. The 4 walls were made of soundproof materials with holes. There was a stage with a golden curtain under a semicircular auditorium that rose step by step. There were not always performances here, and most of the time it was idle. Augustus and Warfield sat in the first row of the auditorium. "Who is the speaker?" "A politician who wants to be famous, the editor-in-chief of or a salesman of an arms manufacturer?" Augustus asked Warfield. a transport ship captain who was once captured by the Kel-morian people. She wants to introduce us to the Kel-morian prison, where she was once imprisoned. Warfield never kept things in suspense. Oh, what does this have to do with us? Is she going to tell us that we would rather die in battle than be captured by the enemy? Augustus asked. In fact, this is related to a rescue mission we are about to launch. The next mission of our company is to attack the Kel-morian prison, where the captain was once imprisoned, and rescue the other federal prisoners there. Warfield said. I thought we could rest for a while. Augustus was not very enthusiastic about dangerous missions. When this war is over, we can take a break, said Warfield. But war never ends, said Augustus. At this time, a person in a long trench coat walked onto the stage with the help of a nurse. Augustus could hardly tell from her figure that she was a woman. She was so thin that even wrapped in the trench coat, Augustus could see her ribs protruding from her body. She was so skinny that she looked like a skeleton in a burqa. I'm Claire Hobbs, and I was the captain of a federal transport ship, she said in a hoarse voice. After my transport ship was destroyed by the Kel-morians, my crew and I were imprisoned in the 34th internment camp. I don't need to elaborate on the torture I and others suffered there, because you can already see how they destroy a person with a healthy will and body. I'm only 27 years old, but I'm lying in bed waiting to die like a terminally ill patient. The audience was silent, and the first shift behind Augustus was listening carefully. The 34th internment camp holds at least 400 federal soldiers and spaceship pilots, including many combat heroes and ace fighter pilots whose planes were shot down and crashed in enemy-occupied areas. They are being tortured there, and what we have to do is to rescue them. This is a schematic diagram of the internment camp taken by an orbiting satellite. It is a three-dimensional model created by computer synthesis of tens of thousands of photos. A holographic projection containing various terrains and rivers appeared in front of Augustus and others. The 34th internment camp is located between three hills in a triangular shape. The top of the hill is heavily fortified, with machine guns, automatic turrets and land defense guns installed. 6 rectangular white military camps are hidden between the hills, and the rest are command centers with satellite communication base stations, water towers and spherical bunkers deployed between the hills. This is the battle plan. Hobbs slid her hands across the holographic avatar, and the three-dimensional image of the building immediately enlarged in her hands. Our Air Force will give priority to destroying the bunkers on the 3 hills, and then you will launch an attack from the front. I cannot agree with this plan. Augustus sat in the front seat, so if he spoke, Hobbs in front of him could hear his voice clearly. If we attack from the front, we will need at least 8 tanks or a company of artillery to provide fire support. If the Air Force cannot confirm that their attack can definitely destroy the target, then even if there is only 1 heavy machine gun on the hill that can still fire, my people will be in danger. Augustus said. I must formulate a new battle plan, otherwise my troops will not participate in this rescue operation. Thank you for the reward from Agent Rangrang and Admiral Jaina. Thank you for the monthly ticket from Blue Sky for taking me soaring. Admiral Jaina and Star Wraith. Chapter 61 Falling from the Sky. Captain Hobbs looked at Augustus and forced an ugly smile on her haggard face. Of course, you can, she said in a hoarse voice. Please forgive the recklessness and impoliteness of a young man like me. Augustus fixed the wrinkles on his uniform and walked up a flight of stairs to the main stage of the opera house. At this time, there were about 60 people in the audience, most of whom were soldiers in the 3rd row, and only officers were present in the other rows. These rows were basically re-socialized soldiers, and they obviously did not need to listen to a pre-war mobilization speech. In the semicircular audience seats that were getting higher and higher, strange or familiar faces, pairs of different eyes were all looking at Augustus. I know you, Sergeant Augustus Mengsk. Even if you count the time in the boot camp, it only took you 4 months to be promoted from a private to a sergeant. When Augustus walked to Hobbs, she said, you have won at least 3 medals. Your resume is much richer and more exciting than some Marine veterans who have served for more than 5 years. The battle at Fort Howe not long ago almost made you famous overnight. Radio and television reported your heroic deeds. A scrolling subtitle below the news. Sorry, Ms. Hobbs, they didn't even interview me. Augustus raised his hands and touched the holographic projection above the stage. The holographic projection, woven by countless light glow lines, rotated, zoomed in, enlarged or shrank due to the sliding of his hands. I believe the reporters of UNNA are preparing to do this, Hobbes said. The holographic projection suspended above the main stage was projected by 4 holographic projectors embedded in the walls of the opera house. It can cover the entire stage, but in Augustus's hands, they are all Rubik's Cube toys that can be manipulated at will. Augustus is already familiar with this. Here, in Augustus's hands, a hill with a pointed top was enlarged in his hands and revealed to everyone. Hill A. The hill simulated by the holographic projection was so detailed that the Marines in the audience could even see a narrow gully a few inches wide and the grass stalks swaying in the wind. At the top of the hill, a circular bunker occupied 2/3 of its area. The bunker had at least 6 firing ports in different directions, which meant that the Kel-morians' firepower could not only cover the hill, but also fire at the camp inside it. Next to the bunker was a rotating anti-aircraft missile tower with 2 anti-aircraft missiles on the launcher. A land defense automatic machine gun mounted between several steel baffles was aimed at the green plain below the hill. Before the attack, we must destroy the several firing points on these hills. Augustus drew a red cross on the bunker. I mean, we can't just think about destroying these firing points as much as possible, but we should occupy them. It would be best if these bunkers and heavy weapons could be used by us. He paused here. Since we have transport ships, we can send soldiers directly to these hills. Then, our crossfire points on the hills can block the Kel-morian camp between the hills. Next, the troops deployed on the front battlefield can enter the shelter under the cover of the airborne troops. This is the first step. Under Augustus's operation, the hills shrank rapidly, and the entire 34th shelter camp was expanding. The rectangular military camps and other facilities between the 3 hills were surrounded by a circle of low walls made of steel plates and electrified steel barbed wire. The bunkers and the liftable automatic turrets buried deep in the ground guarded the 3 entrances between the hills. We can see that, except for the top of the hill and the entrance, the camps used to hold prisoners are not well guarded. Augustus said. Then, we can also break through from the center. The second step, when the Kel-morians are busy retaking the hill or breaking out, my platoon will directly airdrop to the vicinity of the camp, and at the same time, the transport plane will also deliver 500 electromagnetic rifles and ammunition. When we release all the prisoners and arm them, there will be an extra army battalion full of anger in the center of the camp. How many soldiers are there in this camp, and how many of them have power armor? Augustus asked Hobbes. Based on the number of military camps and the size of the water tower, this camp can only support the living needs of 600 people, and the number of prisoners is 400 to 450. So, I estimate that there are about 200 Kel-morian soldiers guarding the camp. Hobbes replied. Most of the Kel-morian soldiers in Camp 34 lack power armor, and the ones wearing the Kel-morians' poor imitations of CMC armor are flat-plate kinetic armor. How many fighter planes and transport ships do we have available, ma'am? Augustus asked again. 16 Avenger fighters and 10 24-40 long-range bombers. There are 32 transport planes in Fort Howe. They come from 17 different units, and can carry a total of 2,000 people. Hobbes said, the 34th shelter has only a very small helipad, and only a few fighter planes can take off and land. In terms of air power, we have an absolute advantage. Fort Howe is the closest Marine Corps base to this shelter. It only takes half an hour to get there by transport plane. That's why I'm asking you for help. This hell on earth has been hidden under the noses of the Federal Army all along. It wasn't until I escaped from there that the location of the 34th shelter was made public. Where are our other reinforcement? Augustus said, don't tell me you want me to take a platoon to rescue those more than 400 people. A battalion of resocialized soldiers has set out from the Hobo Pass, Hobbes said, but what we need are soldiers who can think independently, and resocialized soldiers cannot flexibly complete a rescue mission. Well, my plan is complete, Augustus said. I'm going to tell him to land. This is a good combat plan, but the premise is that we must destroy all anti-aircraft firepower and clear all anti-aircraft missile towers and anti-aircraft guns. Warfield nodded in agreement. This is a clever trick, but it's very risky. Once the transport ship is hit, it will be the end of the plane and the death of everyone on board. This plan may be a great success, but it may also become a nightmare for us, he said. Augustus, your plans are always bold, even crazy, but I like them very much. We are going to rescue people. This should have been the mission of agents and special forces, but the superiors gave it to a group of Marines. Augustus spread his hands. If we were going to attack an armed camp built on a dangerous terrain, I would have artillery and bombers bombarded all day, but that wouldn't work. Thanks to the book Friends Who Are Pretentious. 201708031646083887, Zio Gianaya, B and Z, Zu and Su in the pile of old papers, and Zashi for their monthly tickets. Thanks to Luao Angzu, Command Lsh, and Agent Rang Grang for their awards. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 62 Armor Technician and Medic. Fort Howe Armory, July 30th. Augustus's platoon is being equipped with the new CMC 250/X power armor. This power armor is not a transitional model from CMC 200 to 300, but a trial production armor that can be equipped with a jetpack on the back. After Augustus compiled the plan for the landing operation into a report and submitted it to the Northern Theater Command responsible for commanding the operation, the approved document was quickly sent to the Fort Howe Command Center. The document specifies that Augustus's platoon will be temporarily reorganized into a special operations tactical unit capable of performing special operations missions. During the operation, they will receive additional auxiliary personnel and manpower. The preparation time for this plan is 12 days, so Augustus has enough time to get more benefits for his troops. The R&D team of the CMC 250/X power armor originally wanted to create a power armor that can fly, but it is obvious that all efforts in this regard have failed. Even if the jetpack can already send the armor and its wearer into the sky, the probability of failure is as high as the probability of success. After the last brave test driver fell to his death, the progress of the project gradually stagnated, and later Protion Company used the research and development funds for the Firebat armor. The jetpack used in the castrated CMC 250/X power armor is less powerful and easier to control, but it can no longer send the Marines into the sky, but can only improve their running speed, jumping ability and burst power for a moment. The main developer of this project is Hiram Fick, the third row armor technician standing in front of Augustus. Fick is only 4 feet tall. When standing in front of the Marines wearing power armor, the soldiers have to lower their heads very low to talk to him. I will organize your feedback on the armor and report it to the group. Fick put the notebook under his armpit. He has messy brown hair and a funny mustache. Despite this, he is a polite gentleman with a gentle attitude. If it can really fly, that would be great. Why don't you consider reducing the weight of the power armor, or just let the people wearing combat uniforms carry jetpacks? Renault, wearing the new armor, waved his fist. Ah, that's a good idea, Mr. Renault. I'm writing it down. Fick nodded and wrote it down seriously. Do you have any other good suggestions? Fick continued to ask. I'll write them down. I have a question. Hanak was also wearing the latest armor. Go ahead. Fick was about to write it down. Can I pee now? Hanak smiled shyly. I drank too much beer this morning. But I haven't worn this armor. Does it leak urine? At this point, even Augustus laughed. Hanak always does something ridiculous. Fick's hand holding the pen paused for a moment, but he was obviously thinking about this problem seriously. You don't have to worry about this. The seams of the CMC 250/X power armor plates are well sealed and will not leak. Okay, enough joking. Augustus looked at the time on the helmet HUD display. Soldiers, let's continue training. It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. At 5:30, our platoon can finish work. After you are fully familiar with this armor, we will also conduct airborne training. Under Augustus's gaze, several squads of the 3rd platoon began to line up and walk out of the armory. Boss, Hanak is not joking, Josephine said as she passed by Augustus. Shut up, of course I know. Augustus glared at him. Keep an eye on him. Yes, sir. Josephine saluted crookedly. Just as Augustus was about to walk out of the armory, his personal terminal was called by Warfield. Go to the fortress detention room and bring out a soldier named Lisa Cassidy. From now on, she will be the medic of your platoon. Augustus shouted to Renault, who was about to walk out of the armory. Jim, you will be responsible for their training first. Is that okay? Be careful of that troublemaker Titus. Just watch. Renault seemed very motivated. Augustus nodded and walked out of the armory. He found the fox hunting command vehicle assigned to him and said as he drove, "The military affairs department can't find anyone else? What did she do wrong? I don't want to bring a criminal back." Stimulant addiction. Warfield said. Lisa Cassidy was once a third-level sergeant, but her dependence on stimulants ruined her. Lisa violated discipline 3 times for abusing adrenaline drugs. The Marine Corps physician believed that she might also be addicted to crabs, a hateful drug. In addition, Lisa is indeed an excellent medic. She has saved dozens of lives and sent even more people away from battlefields covered in bullets. What a big trouble. Augustus said. Warfield, you know my attitude towards drugs. It must be banned and eliminated from humanity forever. In the Terran Federation, drugs are also illegal, said Warfield. But there are many lawless places in the Korhal sector that are not under the jurisdiction of the government. In war-torn areas, people always find ways to get what they want, and the grey industry chain prospers because of war. Is there really no one who can replace her? Augustus asked. If there are enough people, I don't need to look for her. Warfield replied. Okay then. Augustus said, but I have to help her quit drugs. Augustus car stopped at the door of the fortress's detention room, and 2 military police in black uniforms were waiting for him. Sergeant Mengsk, we have taken Sergeant Cassidy to the closed reception room number 2. A military police said, come with us. Thank you for your hard work, Augustus said. Augustus walked through a narrow and dark corridor and climbed up to the 2nd floor of the detention room through the spiral staircase. Finally, he saw Lisa Cassidy, who was sitting on a chair and shackled to the back of the chair in a fully enclosed room monitored by surveillance cameras. She had been detained in the cell for 3 weeks. Lisa Cassidy's long hair scattered on the back of the chair was ginger with a satin-like luster. Her facial features were quite feminine and charming. Her light blue eyes looked at Augustus with a D-like weakness. Sir, are you here to kill me? Lisa stretched out her unshackled hand and pulled down the loose collar of the prison uniform, revealing a shallow ravine. The opposite is true, Augustus replied. Sergeant, she has been in the cell for too long and has suffered from paranoia. The military police next to Augustus said. Are there any other procedures to go through? Augustus looked at the military police. I want to take her away. The devils of heaven gathered together. Chapter 6 Augustus's platoon. August 8th. About a week ago, a cold wave from the permafrost ocean passed through the Thorn Plain where the Howe Fortress was located and headed southward. The temperature dropped sharply, the rivers froze, and there was a blizzard. The Howe Fortress had not seen the sun for several days in a row, and a layer of ice condensed on its Victorian-style pointed windows. But this day was different from the previous haze, and the weather was clear. The sun of the Telesis system was like a yellowish ball of light in the sky, and the sunlight was warm. On the landing platform of the Howe Fortress, hundreds of crew members and ground staff were running in all directions at the same time. The Avengers took off one after another, and in the screaming of the air and the engine, the fleet passed through the clouds and disappeared into them. The soldiers of the third row of the first company lined up on the right side of an Apod 34 atmospheric transport plane. Their silver Gracie MC-250/X power armor had a mercury-like luster in the sun. Augustus stood in front of the line, facing his men, proud of the neat line and the solemnity of being ready for battle. His platoon was the most elite unit in the fortress. It's 12 o'clock now. In 10 minutes, we will board the plane and set off. Check your weapons again, Augustus said. Hey, Sergeant Mengsk, look here. A discordant voice interrupted Augustus, but even though he was very dissatisfied, he still looked in that direction. There were 2 cameras pointed at Augustus, and at least 10 members of the undocumentary crew were carrying brackets to move the camera positions and adjust the angles. A microphone fixed on a long pole was brought to him. I'm Maximum Pierce, a frontline reporter and an announcer for the unbroadcasting station. I'm reporting to you from the How Fortress in Telesis. A man in white power armor staggered in front of Augustus, awkwardly put his arm around his shoulders, and aimed at the camera. This is Sergeant Augustus Mengsk, an elite role model of the Marine Corps. His wisdom and character are worthy of the title of a hero. The frontline reporter had a clean and tidy face, a small mustache on his upper lip, and a bright smile. Sergeant Mengsk, your expression now is very good. Soldiers should be so serious and cold. Great. Your expression now looks like you are about to twist the heads of 100 Kel-morians immediately. This is not a live broadcast. Peggy, remember to cut this part, and the background music should be Eternal Glory of the Federation. You are about to carry out a great and glorious mission, rescue the unfortunately captured Federation soldiers. For this, Sergeant Mengsk, what do you have to say? The reporter took out a piece of manuscript paper from somewhere. Just read it. Titus. Augustus raised his eyebrows. What? The reporter was at a loss. Oh, you don't have to read it like this. Just open your mouth. We will resynthesize a voice. The frontline reporter hadn't finished speaking when a huge shadow enveloped him. Then, a huge hand reached out from above the reporter's head and grabbed his helmet, knocking him to the ground with great force. Titus Finley pulled his helmet away from Augustus. We are going to beat the Kel-morians and crush their asses and drive them back to the mud pit of Moria. Titus dragged the terrified frontline reporter and said, my boss is a little unhappy now. Now, I have to ask you to get out of here. If you weren't wearing iron armor, I would pick you up by the collar of your neck and kick your ass and throw you out like a chicken. A group of photographers and uniformed people followed the frontline reporter who was being dragged along the way, but no one dared to pull him back from Titus's hand. Amid the scraping sound of the power armor against the ground, the dazed reporter was dragged all the way to a place hundreds of yards away. If you come up to Sergeant Mengsk again and jump around like a monkey before we complete our mission, I will chain you to the landing gear of the transport plane. Do you understand? Titus' voice was steady and powerful. Seeing Maximum nod, Titus turned and walked towards his platoon. At this time, Titus suddenly began to think about a question. That is, why did he stand up immediately after Augustus just shouted? This is not right. In the past, Titus always thought that his superiors were a bunch of idiots. But Augustus was different. He was almost a natural leader, brave, full of wisdom, and very opinionated. Augustus's subordinates loved him and followed his back as if they were chasing the light. Even Titus had to admit that Augustus had many qualities that even a villain like him admired. This was a good thing. Maybe Augustus would become a hero, even a general, and his old subordinates would certainly get promoted. Most importantly, the Mengsk family was rich. Titus tried to convince himself that he only obeyed Augustus's orders because of his rank and his desire for the Mengsk family's wealth. Form aboard, Augustus ordered after Titus returned to the team. Augustus was worried about the UN reporters. Hobbes was right. The UN was indeed preparing to interview him. Part of the reason was because Augustus had made many military achievements, but more of it was due to political considerations. Although Senator Augustus Mengsk, who was widely praised by the people of Korhal, was a reactionary who gave the federal government a headache, his son was a combat hero of the Marine Corps. He was loyal to the Federation and would certainly fight any separatist forces to the end. Since arriving at Fort Howe last weekend, frontline reporter Maximum Pierce has been following Augustus like a tail, saying that he wants to shoot a documentary depicting the frontline and heroes. Maximum said that a large number of authors hired by the UN are preparing to write books and biographies based on Augustus, and Augustus can only perfunctorily say that it is too early. When the transport ship's engine started, Augustus quickly put this matter behind him. When he looked at the troops, that made him truly proud. Leading the way was Jim Raynor, the squad leader of the first squad. He and the Marines behind him were once just recruits in the boot camp, like a piece of unhammered raw material. But now, the war is gradually forging them into shape. Whether it is a sword or a hammer, it all depends on their own experience and ability. Lisa Cassidy, the latest medic to join the third row, walked at the end. There was a red cross on each shoulder of her silver gray power armor. By reading the resume of this medic carefully, Augustus learned that Lisa's service time was much longer than he thought. Long before the Battle of Kalian began, Lisa, who graduated from Tarsinus University, was already an experienced field medic. Other records were much more shocking. In a canyon encounter, Lisa was injected with an overdose of adrenaline or drugs. In an extremely excited state, she slapped the face of the Kel-morian Skywolf with just one slap. Augustus was still observing the condition of the medic. Lisa Cassidy's stimulant addiction symptoms were much more serious than he had imagined. The withdrawal reaction from drug detoxification often made her listless and depressed. In the original timeline, the Heavenly Demon Squad was destroyed because of Lisa's betrayal. Because a person with a deep drug addiction cannot control himself at all when he is addicted to drugs, and the enemy took advantage of this. Augustus still recognized Lisa's talent, which was why he was willing to save her. But if this person is finally confirmed to be hopeless, she can only be asked to get out. At present, Augustus has cut off Lisa's stimulant supply and banned her from leaving the fortress. He must do this, otherwise no one can guarantee whether she will tear open the mouths of her own people next time. Despite this, he still felt that such means were too gentle. Seeing that Augustus was looking at her, Lisa lowered her helmet, smiled at him gently, and blinked her big light blue eyes. Lisa is a very smart woman, much smarter than she appears. This beautiful woman is trying to please Augustus in the hope that he will allow her to obtain drugs from other channels. Augustus knows this very well. Chapter 64 Just Not an Angel. Passing through the strong high-altitude air currents, the spaceship continued to climb to an altitude of 8,000 feet in an unsettling tremor, and the crazy turbulence stopped. Augustus and his soldiers were tightly tied to their seats with safety belts. Except for Hanuk and Josephine, who were chatting, everyone was silently counting the time on the HUD display. The transport ship had no portholes, and the blue emergency light was the only light source in the transport cabin. About 20 minutes after takeoff, the transport ship started to turbulent again, swaying like a fallen leaf in the wind. Communication code 2472. We encountered a Kel-morian Hellhound fighter. It has been damaged. The voice of the spaceship pilot came from Augustus' helmet. Modern girls are landing. 7,000 feet. 6,000 feet. The hatch is opening. Hallelujah. Good luck to you. The reinforced movable panels on both sides of the spacecraft gradually opened, and the strong wind rushed into the closed cabin. Augustus and his soldiers unfastened their seat belts and stood up in the whistling wind. Through the open hatch, a Kel-morian camp located between the hills has appeared in front of Augustus. In the east and west directions, there are 4 rectangular tent-style military camps vertically side by side. The walls of the military camp prison are made of pieces of glass steel, and the outside is covered with a layer of white tent cloth. To the east of the military camp is a metallic water tower, and the drainage system is a metal pipe connected together. On the other side of the hill, billowing smoke can be seen rising. An AOPD-33 transport plane brushed past the bunker on the top of the hill and fell where Augustus could not see. They were about 50 feet away from the ground at this time. Under the transport ship, people were running everywhere, and some Kel-morians were shooting into the sky. The 3rd and 4th squads jumped first. Quick, quick, Augustus shouted in the communication channel, standing at the hatch door, where the wind was howling and sending one marine after another down by hand. The most dangerous time in airborne operations is the period between jumping down and landing. The lower the jump height, the shorter the time in the air, and the earlier the landing, the safer it is. Augustus must watch every soldier of his land safely. At the same time, this transport ship hovering in the air may be hit by the anti-aircraft firepower of the Kel-morians at any time. Staying on the ship for one more minute will increase the danger. During training, Augustus always led by example, but now he has to jump last in the whole platoon. See you on the ground, sir. Lisa, the last medic to jump down, said to Augustus. At this time, an anti-aircraft missile hit the auxiliary propeller of the transport ship, causing it to start shaking violently. Amid the curses of the pilot, Augustus jumped down holding the AGR-14 electromagnetic rifle newly issued to him. The wind whistled around Augustus's helmet, and the servo components of the power armor creaked as his arms and legs swayed. With the ignition of the jetpack on his back, Augustus forcibly stopped his fall just before landing, and jumped more than 10 meters. The power boots stepped heavily on the sandy soil, and gravel flew. We landed on our feet. Thump, 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 about a dozen spikes and copper bullets hit Augustus' power armor, leaving white marks on his mask. Several Kel-morian soldiers were hiding behind the barracks and shooting at Augustus. These soldiers did not wear power armor, but only wore kinetic armor plates and greaves-like vests, and wore dark green goggles and helmets. Machine gunner, Augustus said in the channel. Without him looking back, at least 2 heavy machine guns were roaring behind Augustus, and 2 rows of golden bullet belts swept across the ground, shooting the Kel-morian soldiers who tried to stop them into sieves. According to the predetermined plan, each squad will go to different military camps to release prisoners, and the 4th squad will protect the weapon box. Augustus waved his hand. The 1st squad will follow me. At this time, in the 34th internment camp, fighter planes flew over the soldiers, and there were explosions and shooting sounds everywhere. Looking up, there was blood, corpses, craters, and flames. When Augustus rushed to the gate of the military camp prison numbered C11, about a squad of Kel-morian soldiers collided with them at a corner. Because the distance between the 2 sides was too close, it quickly turned into a hand-to-hand fight. Among the Kel-morian soldiers, only 2 soldiers who looked like leaders had power armor, but their power armor was much simpler than that of the Federal Marines. Their power armor used the fusion core produced by the Federation, and the armor plate was made of glass steel plates with a lower degree of solidity. This type of armor plate has almost no curvature, except at the joints, as if the Kel-morian mechanics directly use the steel plates cut on the production line to make armor. Augustus, who was walking in the front, used only the butt of a rifle to split the head of an ordinary Kel-morian soldier who rushed towards him, and then Renault and Hanik behind him immediately opened fire. Renault held the electromagnetic rifle and fired at the Kel-morian soldiers at close range. With his improved marksmanship, he immediately knocked down several enemy soldiers. A hot stream that distorted the air gushed out of Hanik's flamethrower, and in the blink of an eye, 2 Kel-morian warriors were set on fire. Augustus rushed straight to a Kel-morian leader wearing power armor. Both sides held their rifles across their chests and collided like bulls in wrestling, trying to knock each other to the ground. However, Augustus's strength was not superior. The Kel-morian leaders were the strongest warriors in the Union. He knocked Augustus back a few steps and laughed triumphantly, but the laughter soon stopped. Rickid, the sniper behind Augustus, had already aimed at his helmet. As the .50 bullet spun, the head of the laughing Kel-morian leader exploded like a broken watermelon. When Augustus stabilized his steps, Titus rushed out from his left side. He put the electromagnetic rifle behind his back, bent over and hit the lower body of another Kel-morian leader, grabbed the opponent's feet, and flipped him to the ground. When he lost his balance, Titus knelt on his knees at the leader's neck, holding the Gauss rifle, and hit the opponent's helmet mask with the butt of the rifle again and again. Although the craftsmanship of the Kel-morian mask is not as good as the Federation style, it can still withstand rifle bullets. However, after Titus swung the rifle, but again and again like chopping wood, cracks gradually appeared on the mask. After more than a dozen swings, with the sound of eggshells breaking, the screams stopped before they were uttered. Augustus looked at all this and thought that regardless of his character, Titus Finley was indeed a fierce general. Stepping on the corpses on the ground, Augustus led the 1st squad to the gate of the military camp prison. Ward blew the gate open with explosives, and the Marines followed Augustus in one after another. The military camp prison was a series of closed compartments. Augustus's troops carried the bodies of the 2 Kel-morian leaders and opened the gene lock with their retinas and blood. When the first room was opened, there were 6 skinny prisoners huddled in the corner, looking up at Augustus and his soldiers with lifeless eyes. Soon, a kind of almost crazy joy appeared on the faces of each of them. "Am I dreaming?" Someone burst into tears of joy. "I can't believe you really exist. Are you angels summoned by God from heaven?" "No. We are many kinds of people," Augustus replied. "Just not angels. Thanks to the monthly ticket of YJX from the dead world." Chapter 65 I don't agree. Augustus opened one prison after another that was separated by steel plates or even iron grills. In the dim rooms without lights, the skinny, emaciated, and tortured prisoners looked like skeletons. Only those who had been detained for a short time had the strength to stand up tremblingly. The Kel-morian Union once claimed that in their internment camps, Federal prisoners could receive the most humane treatment and 3 meals a day, but the fact was obviously not the case. Of course, the Kel-morian prisoners in the federal prison were not much better than this. "We are the Federal Marines," Augustus said to every prisoner. "If you can still fight, then stand up and take up arms. Blood for blood." These people were still wearing the clothes they were captured in, which had now become a layer of rags wrapped around their bodies, with an unpleasant smell. In the wasteland, where the 34th internment camp was located, water was scarce, and prisoners often had to take a bath once a week or more. However, when these prisoners, who were no different from homeless people, surrounded Augustus and his marines, the power of anger and hatred burst out from their seemingly haggard and thin bodies. At this moment, the camp was in chaos. The other troops of Warfield's 1st Company had already captured 2 hills. Another battalion of resocialized soldiers, assisted by 2 arc-light tanks, had begun to attack from 3 directions. The Kel-morian troops in the camp soon found that they had no way to retreat. When the crowd followed several marines out of the barracks and returned to the landing point, Augustus's 4th squad was guarding boxes of weapons and ammunition dropped from the air. Electromagnetic rifles and shoulder-slung ammunition belts were immediately distributed to everyone. The prisoners were organized into a battalion with unified command and unified action. Their mission was to follow the 4th squad to capture and blow up the Kel-morian bunker and the electrified presteel wall between hills A and C from the outside. The 34th internment camp was indeed impregnable. The Kel-morians cleverly used the terrain to transform the depression between the hills into a small fortress that was easy to defend and difficult to attack, but an attack from the inside out could make them lose their minds. Augustus led the 1st and 2nd squads through the military camp, where the prisoners were held, and headed for the command center of the 34th internment camp. Along the way, scattered Kel-morian soldiers either died under their guns or fled in panic. Augustus, Raynor, Titus, and Hanak charged forward. He killed 2 Kel-morian soldiers wearing kinetic vests and smashed the head of another soldier with the butt of his gun. The Kel-morian command center was a huge building with a pointed roof. Its architectural style was closer to the Gothic style. The traces of welding of building panels could be clearly seen on the walls of the presteel. A rotating communication satellite station stood next to it. Only 1 squad of Kel-morian rippers was guarding the entrance to the command center, and it seemed that they had just rushed out from inside to support the defense line or escape. The moment these rippers appeared at the door of the command center, Grenadier Ward had already thrown 2 electromagnetic grenades and 3 Honey Whisperer heavy machine guns, 2 individual missile launchers, and more than a dozen electromagnetic rifles killed 3 rippers who were about to rush out in a few seconds. So, these rippers left their companions' bodies and fled back, disappearing from Augustus's sight. "Hanak, Griffith," Augustus said on the communication channel. "Just watch, boss." 2 firebats walked into the entrance of the command center side by side. A howitzer hit and almost shattered Hanak's chest armor when he stepped through the door and entered the antechamber, but failed to cause any damage to the wearer. At Augustus' request, armor technician Fick thickened the armor plates of all the power armor in his platoon, especially the firebats. Before Augustus and the other marines entered the command center, the Kel-morian soldiers who fired the grenade had already fled without a trace. The group of prison guards who guarded the prisoners all year round were certainly not the elite of the Kel-morian troops. Some of them retired early due to old age or disability, while others were new recruits who had not fought many tough battles. To Augustus's surprise, the Kel-morian command center looked more like a gorgeous private villa. It not only had a restaurant, an entertainment room, and rooms for the team leader and foreman to live in, but also a cafe, an opera house, and a cake shop. At least 50 Terran Federation prisoners were used as servants to keep the entertainment facilities running and clean. It seemed that the Kel-morian supervisor of this internment camp had completely turned this place into a kingdom for his entertainment and satisfaction. I couldn't imagine what the prisoners here had experienced. They were much more decently dressed than their compatriots in cages, and at least had a relatively clean set of clothes. But everyone seemed to have lost their souls. Their eyes were dull, and they didn't react much, even when they saw the Marines in power armor. "Where is Hansbrook, the supervisor of the 34th internment camp?" Augustus found a prisoner sitting in the corner crying. The prisoner was wearing a maid's uniform with a black and white long skirt and holding a broom in his hand. Keep going forward. At the end of the road, the devil, he is there. She almost burst into tears. We have too many brothers and sisters who are suffering here, and their lives are worse than death. Kill him. Lundstein, take your people to find other Terrans in this command center. Augustus was silent for a moment, and then turned and left. Nearly 20 Marines followed him closely. The luxury of the private room of the Kel-morian supervisor Brook was comparable to the living rooms of those nobles in Korhal. A fat middle-aged man with a bald head was sitting in a chair behind his mahogany desk. The moment Augustus saw him, he had a pistol in his hand and was about to shoot himself, but he hesitated to shoot. I thought there were no cowards in Moria. Augustus held an electromagnetic rifle in his hand, and the aiming system on the helmet mask had locked onto the bald head of the Kel-morian supervisor, with only a small tuft of hair left. Kel-morian supervisor swallowed his saliva and slowly put down his pistol. Then, he suddenly began to defend himself. Those captives, those prisoners are completely guilty. Why should I treat a group of demons who cruelly killed my compatriots kindly? They have the blood of Kel-morians on their hands, so they should atone for their sins. My brother died in an air raid, and I wish I could eat the tyrannid who killed him alive. Your heroic pilot. You said so much. Are you begging me to let you continue to live? Augustus shook his shoulders and saw that the other party immediately nodded excitedly. But the gunshots rang out immediately, and Augustus calmly watched the bald head explode into a pool of bone residue and minced meat. I don't agree. The typus will be corrected later. Chapter 66. The Devil in Heaven. Sergeant Augustus Mengsk's troops descended from the sky and successfully rescued 453 Federation prisoners of war from the 34th Kel-morian internment camp. The captured soldiers who escaped the internment camp with honor described the scene like this. The sergeant and his soldiers fell from the clouds. When the cell door opened, light fell from their shoulders, as if wings were spreading from their backs. They are the angels in my life, and it is God who called them to the world. Moria's TV station also reported the news. Their ridiculous host called our heroes butchers who killed wantonly, and demons who took countless lives. The enemy's malicious slander is actually a compliment to us. Sergeant Mengsk smiled and accepted the compliment frankly. Now, that heroic platoon has a new title. They are angels descended from heaven and demons in the eyes of the Kel-morians. So we call them the devils of heaven. Citizens of the Terran Federation, our victory is just around the corner. The economy of Kel-morian is about to collapse. All factories and production lines are used to produce weapons, warships and armored vehicles, but their bakeries lack flour and can't even produce bread. Countless Morians have starved to death. Today is the 4th birthday of Miss Novembanabella Terra, the youngest daughter of Constantine Terra, the new leader of the Terra family of the Tarsinus creation family. Senator Williams said at today's press conference that psychic power does not exist at all, and psychics are nonsense. We must believe in God and believe in science. A group of terrorists attacked a Marine outpost on Antigua Prime. The official spokesman of the Marine Corps revealed that the attack should be related to the Umoyan agent. Ha 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 ha. In the dormitory of the 1st Squad of the 3rd Platoon of the 1st Company of the How Fortress, Hannock was laughing while playing cards. There was a 10-inch wide wooden holographic projection in this dormitory, which was playing news from the Un-Universe News Network. This projector was given to him by Augustus's brother last week. Fake news. I never said I accepted the Kel-morian statement. Augustus threw away all the cards in his hand and said to Hannock, who looked at Hen, I made it very clear. I'm not a demon. In fact, Augustus could have been given a double officer's dormitory, but he flatly refused and chose to live in the same dormitory with the 1st Squad. Why are they all praising you? At this time, Titus, who was only wearing a pair of shorts, was still studying the holographic projection. So far, he still didn't know how to switch TV channels. Why can't they praise me more? Well, why doesn't this damn little thing obey? Jim, come and help me. Today, Augustus's platoon had neither combat missions nor training missions, but was forbidden to leave the barracks dormitory, so even the most restless guys could only stay in the dormitory to play cards or do other things to pass the time. Josephine, who had been partying all night in the bar last night, was still snoring, hugging his pillow, and talking in his sleep. On the upper bunk, Lundstein was reading a cooking manual, while Ward was watching the news and arguing with Titus about which channel to watch. Xander counted his few credit notes again. Pachilian was stacking blocks on the table, and Kilovsky was holding his personal terminal and playing a game called Rise of the Fizz with Rick Kidd and Amy Brandon online. Suddenly, the dormitory door slammed open, and Warfield, dressed in military uniform, came in. "Big guy over there, put on your clothes." Warfield put his hands behind his back. "You have a celebration party to attend. I've emptied my stomach and prepared. Harnack's happiness is always so simple. I'm ready. Get out of bed. Get out of bed, demons of heaven." Augustus slapped the table and said, "Wake up, Josephine." "What? Dinner time?" 3 heads with headphones popped out from the same place at the same time. "Don't you agree with this title?" Titus said as he put a t-shirt around his neck. "I didn't say that." Augustus shrugged. At this time, a propaganda poster painted only in red, black, and white suddenly appeared on the holographic projection screen. A skeleton in a black robe stood in the center of the white nuclear explosion, with red flames flashing in his eyes under the long-brimmed hood, and a pair of angel-like wings behind him. "I think, at least, it can let us get a good meal." Titus thought for a while, and came to the conclusion. The Heavens Devils gathered very quickly. They were wearing thick parkas, thick hats and gloves, and lined up in the square outside the dormitory. Not only the first squad, but also other squads in the third row, walked out of his dormitory, because the honor of Heaven's Devils belonged to everyone in Augustus's platoon. At this time, the sun was about to set, and the 2 rising moons were particularly beautiful under the blood-red sunset. When Augustus stood at the door of the fortress bus and watched his soldiers board the bus one by one, Lisa Cassidy, the only female soldier in the platoon, ran to join the team. Her dormitory was not close to here. Lisa's outfit was not much different from that of the other soldiers. Her close-fitting white trench coat was tied with a leather belt around her slender waist, and her high-heeled leather boots made a clacking sound as they stepped on the ground. She was obviously wearing makeup, with a very light lipstick, and her naturally curly ginger hair swayed in the wind. "Sergeant, where are we going?" Lisa was the last one to get on the bus. She asked Augustus, while waiting for the first person to get on the bus. "I heard it's the town near the fortress." Augustus replied. "The town of how?" Lisa's bright light blue eyes sparkled, and she didn't notice that her voice was full of joy. "I know what you're thinking." Augustus twisted his thick eyebrows together. "I want to tell you, whether it's mice, crabs, morphine, the Garden of Eden, gospel angels, any kind of drug, don't even think about it. No one understands women's hearts better than you." Lisa said with a smile. "I will watch you, and won't move an inch. If you try to get drugs through some route in this town, I will pull you back by your hair." Augustus's cold gray eyes didn't blink. "Just follow me." "Do you want me to hold your arm?" Lisa was 8 years older than Augustus. In her eyes, the other party was just a little brother who was too serious. "Do you think I won't do that?" Augustus began to wonder if he was usually too tolerant, so that Lisa had the illusion that he was easy to talk to. Lisa was asking for trouble. He kept his word and was merciless. "Ah. It's time to get in the car." So there are prints of the Devil of Heaven in the collection thanks to the lazy readers, Ricardo 323, and PassaBZJH for their monthly tickets. Chapter 67 Photos and Tattoos. Like other residential towns built on the basis of military fortresses, almost all business premises in how towns serve the military. The residents here use prefabricated panels cast from slag and wood cut from the boreal coniferous forest to build houses, and the tops of the houses are dark grey shale tiles. Some traditional Telesis people still use fireplaces in their homes, so you can see crimson chimneys on their snow-covered roofs. The residents of the town obviously did not plan the roads well when building their houses, so the streets between the rows of houses are crooked and winding, extending into the darkness where street lights cannot reach. Because the Kel-morian controlled area of Telesis II is constantly shrinking, their fleet can no longer take off at night to bomb cities controlled by the Terran Federation, so the ban on blackouts has been lifted. All the shops are lit, and the windows are bright. Mid-range restaurants, travel hotels, weapon stores selling semi-automatic firearms, bars with sexy girls standing at the door. Augustus and Warfield walked side by side on the streets of Howtown, followed by the noisy heavenly devils. Augustus wore a three-eared hat made of Cadia bear-toothed beasts, and his cold grey eyes calmly looked at the people and things in the town. The cold wind was blowing, and the thick fur tightly wrapped around his ears and the back of his neck. Only the bravest alien monster hunters dared to go deep into the frozen planet to hunt such ferocious beasts, but his brother Arcturus seemed to have a lot of such collections. The Federal Parliament of Tarsinus just announced a new round of economic sanctions against Umoyan yesterday, expelling Umoyan diplomats stationed in Tarsinus. The reason is that Umoyan exported cutting-edge technology to the Kel-morians, funded anti-government element in the Federation, and provided weapons to terrorists and anti-government forces. Warfield talked with Augustus as they walked. The diplomats of Umoyan were driven back again. Augustus slowed down. The anti-government forces supported by the Umoyan Democratic Council were actually the armed forces under his father Angus. The Terran Federation may not have been able to investigate the masterminds behind the demonstrations and uprisings on various planets, but the high-tech weapons they seized were obviously not something that could be made by the marginal colonies. The Kel-morians did not have enough equipment of their own, and it was impossible for them to support the anti-government forces in the Terran Federation in large quantities. Only the Umoyans were keen on infiltration and espionage, wanting to use the contradictions within the Federation to weaken the power of this ambitious and increasingly tyrannical regime, while avoiding direct war. But the federal government will invite the Umoyans back sooner or later, maybe next month. Augustus said, the senators don't want to go to war with two independent regimes at the same time, and the Federation also needs the cutting-edge technology exported by Umoyan. Umoyan also doesn't want to go to war with the Federation. They are not even ready for a full-scale war. If the Umoyans want to settle everything through diplomacy or bribery to maintain the independence of their regime, they are wrong. Warfield was keenly aware of the greed of the Terran Federal Council and the creation families behind it. After the war with the Kel-morian Federation is over, the next target of the Federal Council can only be Umoyan. Well, Augustus nodded silently. He knew that the Umoyans finally succeeded. After the end of the Kalian War, the Terran Federation was overwhelmed by the increasingly fierce internal uprising, and even the independence of the entire planet, and had no time to worry about Umoyan, who was far away at the other end of the Kaprulu sector. At this moment, without warning, Augustus turned his head and looked back, and saw Lisa Cassidy behind him. When she saw Augustus looking at him, her light blue eyes blinked twice. "What are you looking at?" Warfield also looked back, but saw nothing, except a bunch of noisy Marines. "It's the medic you threw to me," Augustus said in a voice that only the two of them could hear. "Lisa is an excellent medic, and her ability is unquestionable. But she can't quit crabs, and can't resist her craving for drugs. I have to keep a close eye on her, until I know a way to solve this problem. Drugs will destroy a person's will, make him degenerate, succumb to pleasure, fear the pain of losing it, and eventually become a slave without dignity. The doctors in the fortress have tried to wean her off drugs more than once, but all failed," Warfield said. "Everyone feels sorry for her. When you look at Lisa Cassidy's performance on the battlefield, you will think she is a strong-willed, calm, and decisive woman. But in fact, even she herself admits that she has a weak will, and she can't control herself. You should put her back in the cell," Augustus said. "It's not up to you and me to decide." Warfield spread his hands. "Lisa's contribution deserves another chance from the Military Affairs Department. If she continues like this, she will be thrown into prison, and a heavenly devil should not be put into prison. But if Lisa takes drugs again," Augustus glanced at Warfield, "then do whatever you want," Warfield said. "I will," Augustus said. Augustus and Warfield walked west along the street and finally stopped in front of a restaurant called Daddy's Restaurant. The restaurant was not big, with only dozens of tables covered with clean linens and stainless steel chairs, but the decoration was quite elegant. The walls were hung with colonial paintings and brass wall lamps, and the waiters carrying plates were young and beautiful with natural smiles. "I thought it would be a high-end restaurant." Augustus looked at the shutter door at the door of the restaurant. "The budget is limited." Warfield stepped into the restaurant. "The people just want a few photos of the heavenly devil celebrating." "Then how did they find you?" Augustus asked. Because this is a political mission, said Warfield. I would rather go roll in the hail of bullets than stay here to eat a big meal. When Augustus sat at the same table with Warfield, Raynor and other soldiers from the first squad, the waiters immediately brought a sumptuous meal. Large plates of roast chicken and beer were delivered to the hungry Marines. Take this. Before eating, Warfield reached into his large pocket, took out a folded flag, and slowly unfolded it. Hey, I like this flag. Harnack shouted loudly. On the flag was the emblem of the Heavenly Devil, a white skull wearing a black cloak, with wings on its back, and red flames burning in its eyes. Heavenly Devils, come to me. Augustus decided to record this moment. Let Major Warfield take a photo of us. All the Marines left their seats, moved the tables and chairs, and lined up in 2 rows in an inner arc. The 3rd and 4th classes at the front were half kneeling, while the 1st and 2nd classes stood side by side. Augustus and Renault in the middle held the flag of the Heavenly Devil. At that moment, everyone was laughing. Augustus was very happy. He was always laughing at the table. We are the Heavenly Devil, born this way. Augustus said, we are brothers. Family background, reputation, status and all prejudices are not important. The blood of the Heavenly Devil flows in each of us. We all have the same identity, that is, the Heavenly Devil. Augustus, you are drunk. Renault next to him said. How can a bottle of beer make you drunk? Do you think I'm going to stand on a chair and say that the goddess of luck is with him like Napoleon? Augustus said. Yes, but you can't say such things in normal times. Renault said with a smile. The sky outside the restaurant window was getting darker and darker. Most of the residents in the town had turned off the lights and went to bed, and the black night also seemed deep. 2 hours later, when the Marines had cleared all the food on the table, Augustus stood up. Augustus had a good alcohol tolerance and was restrained enough, so he remained sober. Raynor, who had been urging him to drink less, had already fallen drunk on the ground, hugging one of his calves and sleeping soundly. Everyone who can still move, get up. Augustus said, take away those who are lying on the ground, lying on the table, and sleeping in the toilet. It's time to go to the tattoo shop. Who is sleeping in the toilet? Runstein didn't drink much, and was still standing. When I went to the toilet just now, I saw Harnack put his head in, hugging the toilet and snoring. Amy Brandon sighed, feeling very embarrassed. I'll go drag him out. Runstein pulled out a tablecloth, and turned to leave. Do you really want each of them to get a tattoo of the devil in heaven? Warfield came over. Yes, they all agreed a few days ago. We had already agreed. Augustus replied. You want a tattoo too? I'm not a devil from heaven, Warfield replied, but I have to keep a close eye on you. Otherwise, who knows if you'll come up with something new. You can't get a tattoo on your face. I know you did some ridiculous things when you were a student. I knew Arcturus would tell you this. Augustus stared into Warfield's eyes. What else did he tell you? About wearing a skirt. Warfield laughed. The topic ended there. Augustus led the Marines out of the restaurant and turned into a tattoo shop that was still open. The tattoo artists were men with bare arms and upper bodies covered with tattoos. They asked Augustus to take off his clothes and sit on a bench, and tattooed him according to the pictures nailed to the wall. There were other devils from heaven sitting on the tables and chairs next to him, and everyone had already chosen the pattern and location they wanted. I like this pattern. The woman with dyed sea blue hair who was tattooing Augustus was using a blade and a sharp knife-like tool to gesture at Augustus's muscular chest. It's cool, she said. This kind of mix and match style is popular recently, Augustus said. When the stinging pain came, Augustus said nothing. His memory told him that this was a necessary process. The tattoo took a long time. At 2 o'clock in the morning, the blue-haired tattoo artist was still dyeing the skull from Augustus' right chest to his right forearm. Runstein stood next to Augustus, watching the tattoo artist dyeing, while showing his chest tattoo, like the flag of the Heavenly Devil. It was also a skull with a black cloak, but this skull held a lance in one hand and a cross shield in the other. Why is there no horse? Augustus asked. I haven't seen a horse. I wanted to ride a Korhal space shark, but it has no skeleton. Runstein was frustrated. You are unexpectedly persistent in some aspects. Augustus smiled lightly. At this time, Titus walked past Augustus and inadvertently revealed his tattoo. Titus was covered with tattoos. The last empty spot on his chest was a skull with a cigar in his mouth and a heavy machine gun in his hand. Very good, Titus. This heavenly demon really looks like you, Augustus said. Titus left with satisfaction. Why does your heavenly demon hold a big hammer? Lundstein asked Augustus. I thought it should be a sword symbolizing authority. Because my grandfather once said. Augustus said, when you only have a hammer in your hand, everything you see will look like a nail. Your grandfather was a hero. He once hunted wolves alone in the wilderness of Stilling. Lundstein said. HMM. Augustus said, I suddenly remembered. Have you seen Lisa? I looked around, but I didn't see her. She came in with us. Lundstein said, but now she is indeed not here. Does anyone know where Sergeant Lisa Cassidy went? Augustus shouted. Augustus realized that the time it takes for each person to get a tattoo is different, depending on the complexity of the tattoo. And if Lisa's tattoo is simple enough, she can sneak out before anyone notices. This woman. I went out once and saw Cassidy in the art gallery. Josephine, who was sitting on a bench playing with her personal terminal, said. What is she doing? Augustus asked. I don't know. Maybe she is admiring the art. Josephine tilted her head. Augustus put on his coat and walked out of the tattoo shop like a gust of wind. It was as incredible that a town dedicated to serving soldiers could have an art gallery, just like Titus, who was wearing a suit and glasses, was sitting in his office concentrating on processing documents. Oh, boss, Lisa Cassidy is a wild horse. If you want to tame her, you have to use reins and whips. Before Augustus walked past him, relationship consultant Kurt Josephine wanted to shake hands with Augustus. I'll beat you to death now. Augustus angrily slapped Josephine's dog head 4,000 words. I didn't slack off, with confidence. Thanks to Agent Rangrong, silly bug, book friend 200 and 2011. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video. 704,574 and Command Ish for their awards. Thanks to Carp King Splashing Leap, Waffle Desert, Bayan Guan, book friend 200 and 2011. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video. 704,574, A Dream of 1,000 Years, What is Real, and Northern Warwolf for their monthly tickets. Chapter 68. Lisa Cassidy. At 3 o'clock in the morning, the town of Howe was silent. The streets paved with bluestone and broken bricks were littered with bottles and cans of garbage, sex industry advertisements dancing in the wind, and magazines with nudity. The two moons in the sky covered the shale roofs of the town with a layer of mercury like silver. Augustus did not have time to put on a shirt and only wore a coat on his upper body. He walked through the silent streets, turned several corners in a row, and wandered around in the depths of the town before finding the art gallery that Josephine mentioned in a corner that was not easy to be found. In Augustus' eyes, this art gallery was really quite decent. On the walls of the maze-like corridors were hung landscape oil paintings and abstract art paintings in gold frames. At the corners of each corridor were glass cabinets and high stools, on which there were phonographs in the style of the last century and crafts carved with alien specialties. After looking at the paintings at the entrance of the art gallery, Augustus did not go into the maze-like gallery, but looked up at several well-hidden surveillance cameras. Augustus knew that he didn't need to venture deeper into the place, as someone would come to find him soon. After Augustus raised his hand to check his watch for the second time, a woman with a short black ponytail and high-top high heels came out. It was obvious that this woman was not a local. She had wheat-colored skin and sexy, plump lips. She wore a brown waistcoat that exposed her waist, with a high chest and tight leather pants wrapped around her round thighs. The woman had a musky smell on her body, but it was not pleasant. This is a Chelsea gallery. Do you want to visit, or do you need some Eden snakes? The woman spoke in a jargon that Augustus could not understand. I don't want anything, ma'am. Augustus took out an ID card of the Howe Fortress and a certificate with a gold-plated eagle logo on the leather cover from his pocket. I'm Sergeant Mengsk, and I confirm that my subordinates are inside. Find her out and bring her to me. The Marines have reason to suspect that you are engaged in illegal business. Don't give me an excuse to uproot this place. You can question my identity and choose to ignore it, but no one will risk their own business. Augustus took out his personal terminal. This terminal, which was only 3 feet wide, projected a holographic projection of Lisa Cassidy. It was an old photo. Lisa was wearing a light-colored dress and a lace sun hat when she was a student. The woman in leather pants didn't say much, but left expressionlessly. While waiting, Augustus also adjusted his coat. He stood straight, his cold grey eyes staring at the end of the corridor. Less than half a minute later, Lisa Cassidy walked out of the corridor, still mumbling something in her mouth. Damn it, damn it, damn it. Lisa was a little impatient at this time, and her steps became faster. Although it was just a disguise, she always had a sweet smile on her face when she saw Augustus, and she was gentle and docile. She didn't look like a medic who would slap someone's face to pieces or cut off the enemy's hands with a scalpel. Lisa leaned her head and tried to walk past Augustus quickly, but the latter pulled her hood and pulled her back. Lisa Cassidy was not a tall woman. She was half a head shorter than Augustus. Good evening, sir. Lisa looked up at Augustus and smiled brightly. Did the tattoo go well? Did they hurt you? It couldn't be smoother. You wish I would die there. Augustus reached under Lisa's hood and pulled her clothes by the back of her neck to carry her outside the gallery. I know that a small metal box containing drugs is hidden in your underwear. He looked at Lisa and said, you think I will definitely not take off your clothes to search. That's your confidence, but I will let the military doctor test the dosage of drugs in your body. The worst result is just to go to the detention cell again. You already have a bad record, so you don't care. Don't think about getting away with it. I can't watch you degenerate, become a slave to desire, and become a puddle of mud. Just because you are a medic in this platoon and a soldier under my command. You are responsible. Lisa bit her lip. You are kind and full of justice. Go on. Augustus looked at her. Is this your new trick? Do you think I will soften my heart if you praise me a few words? Last time you said your father was about to die and wanted me to allow you to transfer some money home. But Anthony Cassidy is not only alive and well, but also receiving 2 pensions and military family subsidies at the same time. He also told me that he could kill a bull with 1 punch, and he went to a bull game last week. Lisa curled her lips and said nothing. You go ahead. Augustus said firmly. It's no use pretending to be pitiful, begging, or acting like a spoiled child. So Lisa stopped talking, put her hands in her pockets, and walked obediently along the street towards the tattoo shop. Augustus drove Lisa back to the tattoo shop like a prisoner, but when he walked in, a group of naked men with tattoos on their shoulders and chests were sitting at the door with stools. They didn't know that Lisa had a history of drug abuse and was addicted, and they only wanted to gossip. Augustus, let's bet on what time you will come back tonight. Renault had woken up with a tattoo of a devil in heaven on his right arm and was waving a flag of the devil in heaven in his hand. You lost everything. Augustus took off his coat and put on his shirt without hesitation after entering the tattoo shop, while Lisa squatted in the corner, away from everyone, and buried her head in her knees. Not going well. Among these people, only Runstein wore a coat and his clothes were always meticulously taken care of. Tell me more. That's not true. A dark line appeared on Augustus' forehead. Instilling, 1 out of every 4 girls is willing to die for you, but you only care about mechas and motorcycles. The Mengsk family may not agree to this marriage. Your mother is not a woman with traditional and backward ideas, but your father will definitely ask about your marriage. Of course, if you just want to have fun, then just ignore what I said. Josephine pushed his non-existent glasses, her eyes shining. I understand. What? Augustus patted his coat to smooth out the wrinkles on it. I saw Cassidy walk out, and she was very panicked at that time. Josephine was still analyzing, but when the boss found out that she was missing, he acted very nervous. Why is that? Why? Amy Brandon asked very cooperatively. Based on my many years of experience in failing to pick up girls, this shows that the boss's courtship has failed, Josephine said confidently. How did you come to this conclusion? I remember that you got an F in logic as an elective. Augustus said. Well, I like that course very much. My dream is to be a detective. Josephine said. No wonder it didn't work out. Augustus said. Boys, we should go back to the fortress. Warfield came over and clapped his hands. We have another battle to fight next month. Put on your clothes. It's cold outside. Be careful not to catch a cold. I won't stay by your bed like your mother and beg you to take medicine. Augustus said as he walked towards Lisa Cassidy, who was squatting in the corner. When Lisa raised her head, Augustus was surprised to find that her cheeks were flushed, her light blue eyes were wide open, and her pupils had lost focus. She smiled unnaturally, ecstatic for fantasy and pleasure. Warfield's office, Fort Howe, near noon. When Lisa Cassidy was in the cell, someone must have secretly supplied her with drugs, or facilitated the delivery of drugs to others. Augustus was sitting in Warfield's chair, copying documents on his desk, while the other party was filling coffee under an automatic integrated sonic coffee machine. Otherwise, in her current state, she can't live without adrenaline-like drugs for a day. When Vanderspool was still in control of this fortress, many of his subordinates used their power to sell and take drugs. Warfield said. It's no secret. They all know where to make the most money. Most of the drugs come from the Port of the Dead. The emerging colony is becoming the backyard of the big drug lords. Their customers come from all over the Terran Federation. Sometimes they also do business with the interstellar pirates of the Kel-morian Federation. What are you going to do? He took a sip of boiling hot and bitter coffee. The coffee beans of this coffee were produced from the agricultural planet Agria and could provide a lot of caffeine. Send her to another detention cell or soldier detention center, or let her pack up and go to the labor camp. Augustus signed the report. The labor camp has a death index, and if you go in now, you will be a resocialized soldier when you come out. Warfield shook his head and said. Hearing this, Augustus looked at the document and picked up another manuscript. You changed your mind? Warfield asked. I just thought that Lisa might still be saved. Augustus said. I haven't tried yet. How do I know she can't quit? If not, I've tried my best. Drug treatment won't work for her. Warfield said. The best treatment for her should be natural withdrawal assisted psychotherapy, but it may take several months or even longer, and she will be very painful in the process. So, I'm going to apply for a double officer's dormitory. Augustus picked up the pen and continued to write. I want Lisa to stay under my nose at all times. Do you think I will approve this ridiculous application? Warfield's hand holding the coffee cup trembled. But I'm not the one who approves it. Augustus said. Lisa is also a demon from heaven. I don't want to give up on her, and my troops really need an experienced medical soldier. No one can stop me. I want to save a person's soul. A week later, August 15th. The single family officer's dormitory is far away from the soldiers' barracks. Augustus has to get up at 5 o'clock every day and rush to the dormitory of the third row before 5:30, rain or shine, and never late. But today, Augustus asked for leave. Lisa Cassidy was being tied to the bed by Augustus with a restraint belt. Her hands and feet were tightly bound, and she was crying. Please, 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 she cried. What? Augustus moved a stool and sat next to her, holding a hardcover paper book in his hand. I'm listening. Augustus and Lisa have lived in the same apartment for some time. There are 2 separate bedrooms, a small living room and a separate bathroom. At first, Renault and others were reluctant to let Augustus go, and were puzzled by his departure. Augustus told them the reason clearly, and told them that he would be back in 2 or 3 months at most. Josephine, Titus and Hannick prepared a lot of condoms and sex products for their boss, and Augustus was very moved and asked them to get out. As for Lisa, she was extremely stunned at first, and was angry at Augustus's overly straightforward sexual harassment. But Lisa soon gave in, because Augustus really wanted to send her to a labor camp to mine. Give me Turk, morphine, I'm willing to do anything for you. Lisa's eyes were red and swollen, and her plump lips were still twitching. I'm in so much pain. In Augustus' eyes, Lisa's body was constantly spasming, and her exposed skin was covered with goosebumps. She struggled to break free from the restraints that bound her, and scratched her own or other people's faces with her nails. Lisa wailed and cried heartbreakingly, but Augustus remained silent until she calmed down. Once you can't get them, the pain will come in multiples. Augustus said, your drug addiction is getting worse, so you must get more. The pain will gradually destroy your will and make you pray to a stone. I understand. I can't bear it. I regret my weakness. Lisa said, I feel much better now. Let me down. No, I don't know if you are lying. Augustus shook his head. You admit your mistakes every time, but never reflect on it. You must sleep. But I have to listen to stories before I can fall asleep. Lisa lay on her bed, staring at the white ceiling. Are you still a child? Augustus put the book in his hand aside and picked up another book, which was a Bible. In the era when the ancestors of the Korhal people still lived on Earth, religion was forbidden on Earth, all beliefs were banned, and the whole world had only one language. Therefore, the ancestors of the Terran people could only recall religious scriptures through word of mouth, and much knowledge and culture were lost forever. I saw and heard the voices of many angels. There were thousands and thousands of them. The angels said loudly that the slaughtered lamb was worthy of power, wisdom, power, honor, glory, and praise. Oh, that's enough. I've heard enough. Change to a fairy tale. Lisa begged, softly. Don't want the story of the old monk and the young monk. Why don't I just give you sleeping pills? Augustus put down the book and picked up another one. It was getting darker and darker. In the cold night, a barefoot little girl was walking on the street. In her old apron, there was a pile of matches. Thanks to Lotus Root Stewed Dragon, Taishang Sheng Sealing Ming Zhenjun, Rang Rang Special Agent, Command Lush for their awards, and thanks to Honorable Ming Mu, Qi Xingping, and Grey-Horned Foolish Snake for their awards. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 69 Preventive Measures. The bedroom was warm. The boiler powered by the fortress's fusion reactor transported hot water through a complex network of internal pipes to every supply station and barracks and other buildings. The heat was released through aluminum radiators, making the interior of the building warmer spring. As for the command center, barracks, engineering station and other temporary barracks that could be lifted off the ground by thrusters, convection heaters were used for heating. When Augustus told the story of Cinderella, Lisa Cassidy had closed her eyes and fell asleep. Her long eyelashes trembled gently, and her chest rose and fell with her breathing. Because Lisa always vomited uncontrollably when she was addicted to drugs, she wore a white long-sleeved shirt that was easy to change and wash. The shirt was very thin, and Augustus could always see the black lace underwear underneath. Lisa's shorts were only 12.5 inches long, and her round and white thighs were exposed. Her small feet were covered with flesh-colored stockings, and her fingers were slightly hooked inward. Augustus, who was sitting on the bed, looked for a while, and then looked away. Augustus admitted that Lisa's body was indeed quite tempting, and he was not ashamed to admit his desire. After all, before he traveled through time, he was also a person who would send "give me a pornographic picture and my friends want to see it" in the chat group. Stuffing the book in his hand into the bookcase next to him, Augustus untied the restraints that bound Lisa and covered her with a quilt. After confirming that every corner of the quilt was square, Augustus turned off the lights and closed the door and left happily. After returning to his bedroom, Augustus opened his pig-handled notebook and began to write the letter that would be sent back to Car this week. As usual, Augustus mentioned some interesting things in the letter to his sister Dorothy and unconsciously talked about his own achievements to maintain his glorious image in Dorothy's heart. Dorothy always complained to Augustus about some rules and regulations in the school in her letters, talking about her troubles and annoying suitors. Whenever he saw a suitor, Augustus always felt an inexplicable fear. Therefore, in his reply, in addition to counseling and comforting Dorothy, Augustus also spent a lot of time and effort to criticize the bad nature of men. In the letter to his mother, Augustus mentioned his brother Arcturus and said a few good words for his brother. He said that Augustus Mengsk was actually a man with lofty ideals, and his ambition was in the sea of stars, but he did not mention that he wanted to go mining. Augustus was afraid that his father Angus would get angry and have a cerebral hemorrhage after knowing it. In the letter, Augustus only talked about his merits in a few words, because he knew that, although his mother would be proud of him, she would definitely be more worried about the dangers behind this merit. In the rest of the letter, Augustus talked about the security of the family and tried hard to make his parents pay attention to this issue. From the Mengsk family's seaside villa, summer manor, mountain castle to the Mengsk sky tower in the city of Stilling, every family residence should strengthen security and guard against infiltration. Originally, Augustus still had hope in his heart, but after reading the letter from his mother last time, Augustus could only accept the fact that he would be involved in the independence of Korhal. He had no way of convincing his father. After careful consideration, Augustus decided to use the information he knew to make early plans and do his best to protect his family. No one knew when the 3 ghost agents would come to take Angus's head and kill his mother and sister. In order to make his father take it seriously instead of treating it as a child's inexplicable fear and wild fantasy, Augustus used sincere words and even played the family card. Mom, it has been 5 months since I came to Telesis. I'm used to death. My comrades and brothers died in front of me, but I was powerless and could only shed tears of sorrow. There are 10,000 crosses on the cemetery of Pox Pride, and 10,000 homeless souls are crying over the city. These days, I'm always worried and unable to sleep. As I watch the bulldozers scoop up the bodies and the crows of Telesis circle the rising dust, I began to think about the meaning of death. Mom, the cause of revolution is always accompanied by conspiracy, persecution, and assassination. Angus believes that, as long as the people of Korhal stand on his side, as long as his supporters surround him, as long as he stands under the sun, the lackeys of the Federation will not dare to do anything to him. But if you ask me, no matter how you estimate the meanness and viciousness of your enemies, it is not an exaggeration. The rulers of the Terran Federation have used various means to eliminate their political opponents, and slander in public opinion is just one of their usual tricks. The Parliament of Tarsinus has sent special forces to assassinate the planetary supervisor of Kel-morian, the president of a giant mining company, and senior officials within the Union more than once. If Angus is determined to start a revolution, he must consider this possibility. Even if he doesn't think about himself, he should think about his wife and little daughter. Mom, I'm worried about your safety and afraid of losing you. Mom, have mercy on your child, who is light years away, and please build a high wall in the Mengsk family's house, so that I can sleep peacefully. Then, Augustus listed a very detailed security system list. For example, all infrared sensors that have become outdated should be replaced immediately with high sensitivity air vibration sensors that can detect invisible units. Build safe passages and secret rooms underground. The passages should lead directly to the apron, and the doors of the secret rooms should be strong enough to withstand nuclear explosions as a minimum requirement. The security forces must receive professional anti-infiltration and anti-submarine training, and they must also be equipped with CMC power armor and use the latest electromagnetic weapons. Personnel must be recruited from Umoyan at high salaries, and only Umoyan people are required. If other parents of Augustus could at least understand it. After all, assassinations against members of the Mengsk family have happened before, but replacing all firefighting equipment is a bit inexplicable. The firefighting equipment that Augustus asked to replace are all the latest models, with only one exception. He asked to stock more powder fire extinguishers, and the powder inside should be sticky. Because he knew that ghost agents could use refractive clothing to become invisible, and this was the simplest way to deal with invisible people. When you can't see them, use something that can outline their outlines to make them visible. Fire extinguishers, flour, and buckets of paint can all work. These are just some of the methods Augustus thought of. As for more complicated ones, he would have to wait until he could go to Car to do them himself. At the end of the letter, Augustus told his mother that he had been applying for a long vacation, but it was not approved. However, he will have a week's vacation before Christmas at the end of the year, and he will return to Car in mid-December. Thank you for your support. Chapter 70, Wetterberg Refugee Camp. By the time he finished writing this, it was already 10 p.m. Augustus was still not sleepy at all, so he turned on the desk lamp and prepared to read. Suddenly, his personal terminal rang, and the caller ID showed that it was Harnack. Augustus, it's bad. Xander and Jim were caught by the gang when they went out tonight. Don't worry, tell me what happened in detail. Augustus closed the computer, frowned, and thought about what Harnack meant. A few seconds later, Augustus stood up and walked to the bedroom door, holding the personal terminal in one hand and taking the flat cap and coat from the hanger next to the door with the other hand. He was only wearing a shirt at this time, and he walked to the main door of the living room while talking. Normally, when the reckless Harnack and the serious Ward stood together, Augustus would always think of being stupid and unhappy, but Harnack was not the kind of guy who would call him to harass him in the middle of the night to play a prank. Only Josephine could do such a thing. The refugee camp in Wetterberg, we'll go to the town of Howe and buy food for the refugees. The more Augustus told Harnack not to worry, the more excited he became, even to the point where he couldn't organize his words. Let me tell you. A person next to him picked up the phone, and it sounded like Titus Finley. There was a lot of wind on the other side, indicating that the two of them were probably in some remote place. Mengsk, this is probably what happened. Titus spoke clearly and at a fast pace, but his shortcoming was that he talked a lot of nonsense, of course, not as much as he did when he was fighting, and Augustus usually blocked it out directly. Today when we went to the town of How to Have Fun, Jim and Xander heard someone talking about the refugee camp in Wetterberg, saying that the people there were about to starve to death or freeze to death. You know Xander's character, he's as kind as the Snow Queen, and he can cry even when watching a movie that's like playing house. Titus said, I didn't take it seriously at all, but they insisted on meddling in my business. He said with a bit of gloating, I don't know where Xander got so much money, he actually bought 2 truckloads of clothes and bread to send to the refugee camp. Jim and Harnack were worried about him, so they followed him. Of course, these 2 people must have paid a lot of money. As a result, not long after entering the refugee camp, they were kidnapped by the gangsters in the refugee camp, along with their cars. Harnack and I happened to go to the pist together and escaped the Wetterberg refugee camp. Augustus had already walked out of the living room and was struggling to put on his coat in the elevator downstairs. He didn't have time to worry about why Titus followed him. I haven't heard of it there. That refugee camp is far away from Fort Howe. It's in a basin 20 miles south of the ruins of Wetterberg. It was established by the city residents who escaped after Wetterberg was razed to the ground by the Sea Dragon Legion. As usual, the federal government has always turned a blind eye and treated those refugees as if they were dead. Titus said, don't they know who those refugees are? I'm sure someone must have secretly gone to find the local gangsters. We went there in casual clothes, and those bastards don't know we are Marines. Send me the location coordinates. Augustus walked into the underground garage and jumped into his command vehicle. Stay where you are, I'll be there soon. We're not going anywhere, boss. Harnack's voice suddenly rang out. Damn it. Don't get close to my face. Titus hung up the communication phone in a roar. It seems that their situation is not bad. At least they still have the energy to quarrel. Major Warfield. Augustus called Warfield's personal terminal when he drove to the 3rd platoon camp. Say, Warfield spit out a word. 2 of my soldiers were captured by the gangsters in the Wetterberg refugee camp. I'm going to take people to find them. Augustus said, I don't have time to write a report. Do you want me to send another platoon? Warfield said after a moment of silence, I will notify the landing platform to prepare the transport plane immediately. A resocialization platoon. Augustus said, they will be under my command. It was not necessary to send so many people to the refugee camp, but the refugee camp was a mixed bag, and Augustus was not sure whether the gangs there had dangerous weapons. We must avoid harming civilians as much as possible. Warfield said at last. I know. Augustus's command vehicle stopped at the entrance of the barracks dormitory. The 2 sentries guarding the gate saluted immediately when they saw him. Notify all squads that we have to work the night shift today. The 2 sentries belonged to Augustus's 3rd platoon and 2nd squad. They were 2 privates. Yes, sir. The 2 Apod light transport ships had been flying in the air for about 20 minutes. In the darkness, the transport ships with flashing lights were like fireflies flying to the horizon. At a certain moment, the transport ships began to descend, with the thrusters perpendicular to the ground, hovering in the air. The movable hatches on both sides of the spacecraft slowly opened, and one by one, the Marines in power armor jumped from a height of dozens of feet, and landed on the soft snow with the help of the jetpack. The power armor of these Marines was painted in the black and grey color exclusive to the Heavenly Devil, with a white skull on the mask, and one of the soldiers held a winged demon flag of the Heavenly Devil in his arms. A row of dilapidated houses appeared in the eyes of Augustus and others. The refugees used car frames, containers, prefabricated panels and other materials obtained from the city to build houses. The shapes of these strange and colorful buildings depended entirely on the solidity of the materials used, and the whims of the builders. No refugee house is the same. The only thing in common is that they are all very simple, and look very easy to collapse. The builders of the refugee camp obviously did not consider the sewage problem. Between the sheds next to each other was frozen domestic sewage and excrement. Large tracts of open space were piled with industrial waste and useless garbage was discarded at will. The simple sheds were crooked and swaying in the wind, covered with oil, mud and other filth. Large patches of dark red, like scabs and mold, were attached to the walls and roofs, like an ugly layer of skin. Even so, these houses could be called mansions in the refugee camp. A considerable number of houses were sheds without walls, built with beams and scrap metal plates, no different from cow sheds. In this cold night, they were full of people who died of hunger and cold. Lundstein, you take the first squad to find Titus and Hannock, Augustus said in the communication channel. Come on, there are ordinary refugees, as well as local hooligans, large gangs, smugglers, terrorists, and separatists who hate the government and the Marines. The group name has been added to the introduction. Thanks to the cat in trouble, Commander Aish, the rural cat downstairs, the dark blue starry night, Agent Rangrong, the Guardian, and the good soul for the reward. Thanks to Lakil, just like Zimuo, reputation blind, Keezingping, grey-horned foolish snake, cat in trouble, pickled pepper rabbit, endless mana, ash druid without goods, son of nature, brother Doi, Canadian suicide soldier Buck, Archer, star dead souls in the tree outline edition _ fourth sister. Tomorrow I will cure procrastination. Dragon Wing 0 votes. B. and Z Keezingping. Variety booking. Book friend. 202011260814455541. Book friend 160,113,080,326,406 for their monthly tickets. Thank you brothers for voting for recommendations. Chapter 71 War Refugees. The plan of the refugee camp sent back by the Synchronous Orbit satellite station shows that this refugee camp, which consists of thousands of crooked buildings, stretches for a mile, with almost no practicable roads, and no flickering lights. The best houses here are newly built wooden attics and huts, and faint firelight can be seen through the windows. The problem of war refugees has a long history, and the residents of each warring planet are the most direct victims of the battlefield. The Terran Federation is unwilling to invest resources to accommodate refugees on planets where wars are fierce and cities are always changing hands. As for the Kel-morians, they will establish settlements and colonies on every planet rich in minerals, grab all resources, and then abandon them. Their predatory and nomadic colonization method determines that the number of their colonized planets is much smaller than that of the Terran Federation, and the population is only a few core worlds. Most of the wars were fought within the territory of the Federation, so that most of the Terrans on the marginal planets became refugees. The Kel-morian Federation is martial by nature, and all the people are soldiers. Adult Kel-morians who have lost their homes will join the army. Tillisis is a mineral-rich planet, but its high-energy gas resources are relatively scarce, and it relied on imports before the war. During the war, the trade routes of the Terran Federation were greatly affected, which made the lives of local residents, especially refugees, more difficult. The Kel-morian warships are far less large and armored than those of the Terran Federation, but their more maneuverable assault ships and interstellar speedboats can use wolf-pack tactics to attack caravans and leave before the arrival of the furious Federation fleet. With the support of the Kel-morian Federation Union, many Kel-morian fleets have become professional pirates. The sharp decline in imported goods has plunged Tillersis into a fuel crisis and a local food crisis, because all gas refineries and mines on the planet have to supply the front line. This has also paralyzed civilian trains, cars and most means of transportation, and planters, harvesters and agricultural robots cannot work properly. Famine has begun to break out in many places in Tillersis, which was originally only able to achieve self-sufficiency. Take the Pride of Pok, the first city Augustus stationed, after arriving in Tillersis, for example. More than half of the more than 1 million residents of Pride of Pok died in the first year of the war. When the war came, the city's grain reserves were forcibly requisitioned. In order to keep the city residents away from the war and ensure their safety, soldiers with guns drove the law-abiding federal citizens who paid taxes on time out of their homes. Many people did not even have time to bring clothes and blankets. Officials at the city hall told them that there was a refugee camp built outside the city, but in fact there was only a deserted vacant lot. The Tarsinus government only issued an order to evacuate civilians and boasted about its achievements in the media such as but did not build a shelter for those civilians. The deaf and dumb government officials and senators were unwilling to pay more money. The lives of the people were not worth mentioning in their eyes. They just remembered that there was a group of people who needed to be evacuated, and after a while they forgot about it because they were too busy. Neither the federal government nor the founding family of Tarsinus behind them wanted to spend even a penny on refugees, because the money had to be invested in weapons manufacturing and other monopoly industries that flourished due to the war to grab more profits. The war was still going on, and the planetary governor of Tillersis and the army headquarters were indifferent to the refugees. The local refugee management bureau was set up just to shut up the media, with only a dozen civilian staff and cheap security guards hired locally. The federal government would only approve the appropriation for paying the salaries of these employees, and this department actually had neither the power nor the funds to control. In the increasingly bloated and corrupt Terran Federation administrative system, this has become a means for corrupt officials to defraud funds. When the winter of that year came, most of the people who were driven out of Poke Pride either starved to death or froze to death. We need some guides. Augustus took a few steps on the snow-covered ground, with only the sound of the servo system turning and the wind outside the helmet in his ears. The landing point was an open space outside the refugee camp, with no shelter around, only some garbage and coal slag. Find them. The Marines behind him immediately split into two groups and walked into the refugee camp from his left and right, turning into the gaps between the houses. The searchlights were extremely dazzling in the dark night. Xander and Raynor fell into the hands of a group of gangsters and could be killed at any time. Augustus didn't even have time to use the loudspeaker to broadcast and ask who was willing to cooperate with the Federal Marines. There was a burst of screams and shouts from the house in front, but it soon subsided. A few minutes later, Augustus's heavenly devils returned to their commander with several men wearing long coats and thick coats. "We are the Federal Marines who are here to eliminate the gang forces in the area. I'm Sergeant Mengsk. As long as any of you can provide information about the gangs, in the name of Jesus Christ, I guarantee that you will be able to return home safely after this." Augustus looked at the refugees in front of him. "As a thank you, my soldiers will give you some emergency rations and clean water." I know. They immediately rushed to answer. "You go first." Augustus looked at one of them. "There is only one big gang here, and they call themselves the Free Revolutionary Army." A man in a tattered coat said. "It's a loud name, but it doesn't matter." Augustus interrupted him. "Tell me how many people they are, and where their base is." "There are about 200 of them, and some of them are wearing armor just like you." The refugee with frostbite on his face seemed to recall something, and he gasped and inhaled the cold air into his lungs. "The base of the Free Revolutionary Army is not here," he said. "They are mainly active in Fenner Crossroads, and the town is about 7 miles away from here." "Do you know where their base is specifically in Fenner Crossroads?" Although he asked this, Augustus didn't hold much hope. However, the information Augustus got was still very useful information. That is, this gang is likely to be connected with the Kel-morians or even the Federation's own army. During this period, the chance of power armor falling into the hands of civilian armed forces was very small. And although Fenner Crossroads was just a small town, its population had exceeded 50,000. This is a small town built on rare mineral deposits. The residents there have been miners who have to dig underground for a living for 3 generations. Augustus realized that it was a good choice to ask Warfield for an extra platoon. His usual caution helped him. "I don't know, sir," the refugee said. "That's all I know. Who else knows more?" Augustus continued to ask. "No one knows where the headquarters of the Free Revolutionary Army is. They have many enemies." Another refugee immediately spoke up, "But as long as one of their leaders is caught, everything will be solved. All the gang members are residents of Fenner's Crossroads. Their boss is Silas Tusk. Tusk likes to go out with a gold necklace and a gold watch, and often drives an open-top Terra hover car for a ride." Well, Augustus nodded. He waited for a while, and saw that no one spoke anymore. "I know. Huck." Then, at Augustus' instruction, Corporal Huck, the squad leader of the 2nd Squad, handed each of them an M2 backpack full of food and water. Augustus was not prepared to give them too much food. There were hungry refugees all around. Hunger and greed would turn them into evil spirits. When Runstein returned with the first group, Titus and Harnack were following him. "Boss, I finally see you." Harnack panted after running all the way. "What did you find out?" Titus pointed at the refugees running away. "We may have to go to Fenner Crossroads," Augustus said. "Jim and Zander may not be there, but as long as we root out this gang, it will be fine. Maybe, I know where they are." Titus showed a smug look and picked up his personal terminal. It showed a blurry satellite map with a red line connecting 2 points crookedly. "You installed a tracker on the truck." Augustus' eyes lit up. "Titus, you did a good job. But I don't understand why you did this unless you knew there were robbers. It's always good to be more careful. I have been in the army for more than 10 years and I have learned a lot." Titus laughed. "I noticed that someone was following us secretly, and those bastards would never know that there was a satellite positioning tracker the size of a fingernail in the gap of the truck bed of one of the trucks. But I still want to remind you that you should always think of the worst possible situation. Maybe these 2 guys have already died, and we are just collecting their bodies." Titus said with a little sadness. "Alas, I will miss Jim. This kid is still young, but I didn't expect him to die earlier than an old guy like me." "That's not necessarily true." Augustus waved his hand, and his men immediately lined up and walked towards the landing transport ship. Jim and Zander must have been targeted when they were buying food in Howtown. They spent too much money at one time, and the truck was too long to go to the refugee camp, so it was hard not to be noticed. But this may have saved their lives. The gangs knew they were rich, so they had to torture them for their bank passwords, and finally contact their families to get money to redeem them. Augustus said, "Let's go. Do you want me to give you a gun? Why, do you expect me to bite off the enemy's ass with my teeth?" Titus showed a fierce expression. "I thought you didn't want to go." Augustus chuckled and threw his rifle to Titus and took a shotgun from Lundstein. "To hell with it. They have spent all their money after buying food. I rented these 2 trucks, and God knows how much money I have to pay." Titus' heart was bleeding, and this was the real reason why he installed the tracker: fear of losing it. "I won't see Krina, Susan, Mitty, and Aunt Sophia in Nortown for at least half a month." Augustus was silent. Carrying an electromagnetic rifle, Titus followed Augustus to the gangway of the transport ship and said, "Do you have a cigar?" "No, you know I never smoke." "Hold it. Wayne Ranch, 3 miles north of Fenner's Crossroads." This ranch was originally used by locals to graze Tillercis reindeer. This creature feeds on thorny bushes in the cold zone of this planet, but looks more like some kind of 4-legged reptile than reindeer. Now it has been abandoned, but there are more than a dozen brightly lit prefabricated panels and reinforced concrete buildings in an open space, surrounded by wooden fences, and dozens of gang members armed with electromagnetic rifles are patrolling back and forth between the houses. Behind one of the 4-story concrete buildings, there is a 10-foot deep circular pit. The bottom and inner wall of the pit are poured with concrete. There were 2 people in the pit, Renault and Zander, who were kidnapped. 4 or 5 gang members were standing on the edge watching them. "It's minus 20 degrees, kind gentlemen." Silas Tasker was standing on the edge of the pit, smiling at the guests he had invited. Unlike his usual upstart attire, Tasker was now only wearing a somewhat shabby fur coat, with greasy hair hanging listlessly on his forehead. Tasker was a very smart man. Almost everyone thought that the headquarters of the Free Revolutionary Army was within the Fenner Crossroads, but that was just a cover. In fact, he had 5 different bases. "I just need to pour a bucket of water, and you will freeze an arm or a leg," he said. "You'd better tell me the remaining bank accounts and passwords." "We've already told you all our bank account numbers and passwords." Renault made a gesture of turning his trouser pockets. "We have no money. You are lying." Tasker suddenly shouted, "How could anyone take out all his money to buy food and give it to a group of unrelated refugees? This is impossible. Mr. Renault," he emphasized again, "my patience is limited. I don't know what you can expect to get from a pauper." Renault said, "I'm so poor that I can barely make ends meet. If I were the boss, I would definitely not be able to pay my employees' salaries." "You are eloquent, Mr. Renault. But I will soon make you shut up forever." Tasker had to accept the fact that Renault was really a pauper, and he began to become extremely angry. "I know you two are Marines, but don't think that we in the Free Revolutionary Army are afraid of you, a bunch of running dogs of the Federation. So what if we are Marines? Marines are nothing but a bunch of trash. The world belongs to the workers. The world belongs to Kel-morian. Thanks to you and King Wei, Dreams, Chenfeng, Xbada, Mengai Health, Commander Aish, I will fight with you, and Agent Rangran for the reward. Thanks to blank, GLaDOS, the Harmonious Mark Rabbit Gundam, the Dog Slaughterer Unbounded Lord 123, it's Wuxin, Coughing to Death, Wan Wan, Kim Guanshan, Pixie Loves to Sleep, Commander Aish, Heartless Investment, Northern Wolf Warriors, Book Friend. 2017031646083887, and Umawahahazaya for their monthly tickets. Thanks for the recommendation tickets and the investment. Chapter 72 The Demon Chief. The deep blue sky seemed like an inverted sea, with a bright moon rising and another setting, and below was an endless sea of clouds. 2 Apod transport ships, each carrying a main platoon of Marines, crossed the night sky of SYNOPSIS II, leaving behind 2 silver lines like shooting stars. At a certain moment, the 2 transport ships suddenly accelerated, and the ice blue flames ejected by the thrusters became brighter. They dived into the clouds like boobas folding their wings and piercing the sea. Augustus' seat trembled with the bumpy transport ship. He held his breath and silently counted the string of numbers on the HUD display. Beside him, Marines holding electromagnetic rifles and machine guns sat neatly in their seats, with identical skull patterns printed on their mud masks. The driver of this transport ship must be a lunatic. The spaceship was falling like a hunting hawk, and the angle between the horizontal plane and the ground was infinitely close to 90 degrees. Augustus felt that he was falling directly towards the ground. The weightlessness and dizziness of the rapid fall made his heart beat like an out-of-control pendulum. Titus Finley was sitting opposite Augustus, and 2 safety belts tied him firmly to the seat. Even so, Titus was still smoking a cigarette from Ward with an unchanged expression. As soon as the ash fell, it was blown to the rear of the cabin and disappeared. After the ash flickered several times, the thrusters on the side of the transport ship ignited again, and the bow of the transport ship gradually leveled off. The belly of the ship was almost close to the ground and drove towards the distance in the white wilderness full of thorns until SYNOPSIS II. The spaceship began to slow down, and the side baffles opened immediately. Augustus could see that the spaceship was flying at a very close altitude to the ground, and the scenery on the ground was quickly left behind. He unbuckled his seatbelt, walked up the aisle holding the handrail, and held the iron bar on the side of the ship. Jump. Augustus gave the order after the first house appeared. Marines in dark grey power armor jumped down one after another. When Augustus jumped into the strong wind, the transport ship had circled several times over the gang's stronghold. Augustus landed steadily near a concrete building with flickering lights. 2 heavenly devils stood beside him, guarding their commander. In the sky, another ship full of resocialized soldiers hovered over them, and Marines armed with live ammunition jumped from the air. In front of Augustus, gang members wearing only civilian clothes fled in panic in front of him with automatic rifles or even pistols. Some people only held sticks and dung forks. After Augustus raised his rifle and fired a few shots, these people began to flee in panic. His troops collapsed without any resistance, and the Marines herded the unmotivated gang members like cattle, with more people raising their hands in surrender than opening fire. Ignoring the screaming men, Augustus and two heavenly devils clung to the wall of the concrete building and went around to the main entrance. The main entrance was a piece of cut composite wood, thin and fragile, and the Marines in power armor easily broke through the door. With the clang of the door being smashed open, a gang member in pure black power armor rushed out, bent over. The gang member's power armor was very similar to that used by the Kel-morians, but without so many emblems of family and bloodline. Perhaps due to the defects of the servo system, his movements were quite stiff, and he looked more like a Kel-morian imitation of the Federation power armor. The Kel-morian Ripper rushed towards Augustus like a clattering main battle tank and tackled him. Damn it. Augustus fell to the ground, and before he could stand up, the other man sat on his body, making him unable to move. Then the gangster picked up his electromagnetic pistol with one hand and aimed it at Augustus's mask, preparing to shoot, but the latter punched open the other's arm, making both of his shots miss. In a flash, Henry, the squad leader of the third squad, knocked the crazy gang member away after a run-up, and another Heaven's Devil aimed at his helmet and fired after the enemy was knocked away. With a sound like a broken light bulb, the opponent's already broken helmet was pierced by the shotgun bullet. Sir, you really need to practice. This is not the first time you have failed in close combat. A Heaven's Devil stretched out his hand to Augustus. I owe you my life, Henry. You're right, my performance in this area is simply a piece of shit. Augustus stood up and felt that this scene was familiar. He took a deep breath and said, fortunately, my swordsmanship teacher didn't see this scene, otherwise he would be ashamed to admit that I was once his best student. During the boot camp, Augustus's combat subject scores were very high, but there was no contradiction with his continuous being knocked down. Everyone has his strengths and weaknesses. Henry tried to comfort Augustus, but a noise in the communication channel interrupted him. This is the first squad. I'm the deputy squad leader Lundstein. I found Jim and Maximum. They are both alive. Where are you? Augustus was delighted with the news. It's a concrete building painted crimson. There is a deep pit behind the building. Lundstein replied. I know. Augustus looked up and found the crimson building. At the same time, he ordered all the devils of heaven to clean up the battlefield by resocialized soldiers. When Augustus arrived there, more than 20 disarmed gang members were standing in a row, with their hands raised and leaning against the wall. A heavenly devil in black and grey armor was guarding them. I knew you would come to save us, Augustus. Renault had been pulled out of the pit by Lundstein with a rope, and he looked fine. There won't be a next time. Augustus was furious when he saw Renault. His mask slowly opened, revealing an angry face. God knows where I will go to save you next time. Do you think you are a princess kidnapped by a dragon? Huh. From the moment he received the news, Augustus had been controlling his emotions to prevent them from affecting his judgment. But at this moment, Augustus didn't need to control himself anymore, because he had to let these two bastards know how angry he was. Why didn't you discuss this with me in advance? You should have at least told me anyway. Do you think I wouldn't be scared? I can't even imagine the possibility that you're already dead. I can only deceive myself. For a moment, no one dared to speak. There were only sporadic gunshots and breathing sounds around. The gang members with their hands raised looked at Augustus blankly as he reprimanded his subordinates. Speak up. Forget it, Augustus, they already know they are wrong. Lundstein walked to Augustus and whispered. Renault was speechless. He knew Augustus must be very anxious. Augustus was just that kind of person. He rarely showed negative emotions, but that didn't mean he didn't have them. At this moment, Renault suddenly felt like he was scolded by his parents when he got into trouble as a child. Little Renault's mother would carry a basket of freshly baked bread, stand in front of him, and detail his crimes, sometimes even shedding tears. When his mother had almost finished scolding him, his father, who had been sitting on the sofa in silence, would say a few good words for him. The experience of being scolded taught Renault that, when he was in the wrong, refutation, quibbling, and making excuses would only add fuel to the fire. Generally speaking, being a coward is the wisest choice. We thought you wouldn't agree. Xander whispered. Even if you knew I didn't agree, you still had to say it. Augustus stared at Xander like a wolf, and his cold eyes made him take a few steps back. Are you an idiot? Why don't you think more and consider it carefully? Instead of making a decision on a whim and then using your but to think about what to do specifically. Xander wanted to say that he knew he was wrong, but Augustus was so angry that he was almost in a state of exploding. What do you mean? Augustus stared at Xander with his cold grey eyes, like a lion suppressing his anger. Let's talk about it when we get back, Augustus. We still have to deal with those gangs. Runstein patted Augustus' shoulder and winked at Xander. Shoot them all. Augustus shook off Lundstein's shoulder and turned his head away from Xander. He almost roared out, frightening the gang members' legs. Even if they all deserve to die, this job shouldn't be done by us. Lundstein said, we checked the warehouse here and found that in addition to food, there are also many parts of vulture vehicles and armored vehicles. I think this gang should have been engaged in arms smuggling before, and the buyers must be the Kel-morians. Augustus took a few deep breaths to temporarily restrain his anger and turned to think about how to deal with the things in the hands of these gangsters. Take away all the food, and as for the weapons and equipment, give them to the logistics officer in the fortress. Why should those who sit in the office get it cheaply? At this time, Titus, carrying an electromagnetic rifle, was walking over with several heavenly devils, with a cigar in his mouth, that he got from nowhere. If you ask me, those bandits probably have a lot of good stuff in their hands. Titus flicked the ash off his cigarette. Equipment, spaceships, money. In their lair, you can even find a lot of money and boxes of drugs. Find their gang leader and force him to tell you everything. Augustus and Titus looked at each other and saw cunning and greed in each other's eyes. It's not easy to do it. Augustus shook his head. I have a way. Titus' eyes lit up and he walked closer. I have confirmed that the armor recording has been turned off. Augustus said, I have been in the business of wrestling military supplies for almost 10 years. I know who can be trusted and where the customers are most willing to spend money. Titus exhaled a puff of smoke. It's foolproof. It's impossible to be foolproof, but even if you check, you can only trace it back to me. Titus replied. Yeah, Augustus said. Okay, we'll split the money in half. Titus said to Augustus. Augustus shook his head. You get 70% and I get 30%. I'm taking a bigger risk than you. Titus showed an unhappy expression. A second later, he added, you get 80% and I get 20%. Keep the equipment and stockpile it first. Augustus said, I'll need them in the future. Besides, I'm not short of money, so there's no need to take risks. Titus' throat was a little dry. The most important problem was that he was short of money. For a man like Titus who would spend a lot of money on women, money would always go away quickly. Sometimes, Titus would find 4 women in one night, and the salary of the Marine Corps was not enough for him to drink. So what you said is true. In a few years, you will have plenty of opportunities to use your network to make money. Augustus just wanted to confirm whether Titus had the ability to turn the seized materials into cash. Go, Titus, go find that gang leader. If you find him, all the valuables on him will be yours. I won't give you a chance to regret it. Titus didn't want to pay attention to Augustus, but his feet moved on their own, so Titus could only curse himself for being spineless in his heart. After a while, a man with messy hair was dragged in front of Augustus by Titus. He only has a watch on him, Mengsk. I really shouldn't have believed you. That's your bad luck. Augustus said and looked at Raynor who was hiding out of his sight. Jim, tell me what this guy did to you just now. He threw me in and said he would pour water on me. Raynor was relieved to see that Augustus was no longer angry. He had no interest in revenge. He just hoped that Augustus would calm down. Throw him down. Just make sure his head doesn't hit the ground. Augustus said to the demons of heaven around him. Wait, you can't do this. Silas Tasker shouted in horror as he looked at the Marines with skull patterns on their helmets, who were gradually approaching him. I still have value. You can't do this. That's not what you said 10 minutes ago, Renault complained. You are a revolutionary. You are the son of a worker. You fight for the enemy. Then prove your worth. Augustus looked at Tasker and said calmly, otherwise I will hang you up and let the son of Telesis II bake you dry for a month. I swear I will make you regret being born into this world. I have 12 sets of power armor and several vulture vehicles hidden in warehouses and basements, as well as 2 retired federal Goliath robots. I also have 2 million credit coins, all in cash, and I have 1.5 million in my bank account. Tasker took out a hand-drawn map and handed it to Augustus. Very good. Augustus took the map and handed it to Lundstein beside him. Go check it. Titus, give him a quick death. Thanks to the Eden-class world ship, Corporal Carry-On Patrol, Archbishop Artemis of the Protus, Pingbakis and Shishu, and Agent Rangran for their awards, and thanks to the long monthly ticket Yuzan Dialzan, Corporal Carry-On Patrol, Book Friend 2020031419492863 Book Friend 201905271825383777, QIU Mao, Floating Water Light Boat, gorgeous articles, and the monthly ticket without shaking or jumping. Thank you for your recommendation votes and investment. Chapter 73 Buyer. Oran is located 17 miles north of Fort Howe. Thousands of vertical Gothic houses are built on the top of Mount Hercules, which is 10,000 feet above sea level. The top of the mountain is covered with snow. This is the most famous ski resort and holiday resort in the hemisphere. The large and small hot springs formed by geological movements have created Oran's world-renowned hot spring hotels and holiday villas. Before the war broke out, Oran was a favorite holiday resort for celebrities and dignitaries until Assist's II. The influx of wealthy people in this town, which has only been in existence for more than 20 years, brought unprecedented prosperity. Commercial streets selling luxury goods and souvenirs were built around the ski resort, and the rich spent money to buy castle-like mansions here. Of course, this was 3 years ago. When Augustus and the first team of the Heavenly Demons arrived in this town, the prosperity was no longer the same as before, and the streets were desolate. The depressed residents watched their every move with vigilance, and there were more drunkards and sex workers than they had encountered in any other city or town before. Haven't you figured out what the buyer does? In the freezing cold, Augustus leaned against the locked window of a ski equipment store, his hands in his pockets, looking at the red brick street. In front of him stood 4 or 5 heavenly devils in different postures. Lisa Cassidy, who was wearing the same brown parka as Augustus, stood on his right. Her long ginger hair was tied into a ponytail with a blue tie. The ponytail was gathered on her right shoulder and rested on her chest. Most of these soldiers were tall and strong. They had developed strong bodies through daily training in fighting. Connor Ward, who had a tanned skin, and Titus Finley, who always looked fierce, looked like 2 upright strong bears. The hooded skull tattoos on the necks of the tall and thin Hanak and Josephine were faintly visible under the standing collar of their long windbreakers, enough to scare off anyone with ulterior motives. The buyer is a friend of my friend. It is said that he is an Avo-Rish who made a fortune from the war and is in urgent need of some luxury goods and decent weapons and equipment to expand his influence. But you also know that you can't believe it all. Smugglers, human traffickers, drug gangs, space pirates and scavengers who make a living by picking up and stealing garbage. They could be any kind of people. Titus said, it is a good thing not to get too deeply involved with these people. Asking them too deep will make them wary. We don't know who they are, and they don't know that we are Marines. This is good for both sides. Even if you get close enough to them, be careful that these people will sell you out. Well, this makes me think, should I trust you without reservation? Will you sell me out? Titus. Augustus nodded, with an inexplicable meaning flashing in his cold grey eyes. Oh my god, you won't find anyone more trustworthy than old Titus. In my hometown, everyone says that the son of the Finley family is honest and trustworthy, and everyone loves him. Titus put his arm around Augustus' shoulders. The version I heard was that you even sold your mother for drinking. Augustus said. Which son of a bitch said this? Titus' eyebrows were twisted together, feeling really angry. I really love her. No one loves her more than me. But I have to leave that boring town, where people are buzzing like flies. In the summer, I can only stay in my father's coffee shop in a daze, and the customers in the shop always surround me and laugh like fools. I'm tired of that kind of life. That's why I appear here and choose to be a loyal soldier. How is your mother doing? Augustus asked. Ty just talked about this and that, but he was unwilling to swear loyalty to himself. But Augustus didn't really care. I often dream about her. Ty just replied. At this time, at a corner of the street, in the narrow alley between luxury stores and food stores, a man wearing a long-brimmed flat hat and a low-level miner's uniform walked out. He looked around, then lowered the brim of his hat, and walked towards Augustus and others, followed by a man with a round belly and several strong bodyguards, one of whom was holding 2 password boxes in his hands. What a sunny day, sir. I always miss my wife who died in childbirth at this time. The man with a big belly ran to Augustus, stood still and wiped his smooth scalp with his silk handkerchief. Do you have a wife? I haven't seen my bride, Augustus said. We brought the goods. Where are they? If what Mr. Smith said is right, then we can get 50 electromagnetic rifles, 200 KMC-12 automatic rifles and a set of CMC power armor. The man with a big belly stopped sweating, and his expression was unusually calm. His eyes, as thin as eyebrows, showed a shrewd brilliance. Are you Mr. St. Nicholas Caesar Augustus? Yes. Augustus replied with an unchanged expression. Follow us. Don't ask questions. Keep your eyes forward. Seeing the other party nod, Augustus waved his hand and left with the heavenly demon, and the buyer's men followed closely. At 11:3:46, this is Rick, and no one is following you. The voice of Rick Kidd, a sniper in the heavenly demon platoon, came from a mini headset produced by Umoyan hidden in Augustus's ear. I will report again in 5 minutes. Last night, Augustus sent away the commander of the resocialization platoon and took his heavenly demons to count the supplies in the hands of the gangster gang. They found more than 300.50 caliber automatic rifles, dozens of boxes of copper bullets and electromagnetic grenades, and nearly 100 old-fashioned electromagnetic rifles. At the same time, there were 14 power armors, 2 Goliaths and 5 assault armored vehicles. The gold and silver jewelry piled in the warehouse made Renault and Runstein's hands numb. God knows why a gang leader is so rich. Augustus even doubted whether there really was a huge organization called the Free Revolutionary Army. Augustus handed over some of the inferior equipment to Warfield, and the food was sent to the Wetterberg refugee camp in the name of the Heavenly Demon. The rest continued to be sealed in their original locations. Originally, Augustus wanted to keep all the equipment, but after a night of thinking, he decided to sell a batch first to test the waters. The independence of Korhal IV is a foregone conclusion. As a member of the Mengsk family, even if he wants to escape, the agents of the Terran Federation will chase him to the ends of the earth. Augustus will inevitably devote himself to his father's revolutionary cause and be tied to the war wheel of Korhal IV. Either usher in a new life with Korhal, or perish together. Since his brother Arcturus is determined to realize his life ideals in the mines, Augustus has to shoulder the burden of saving the Mengsk family in Korhal. Thanks to Crazy Bull Invincible and Agent Rangrong for the reward. Thanks to Agent Rangrong, Sleeves Angel of Death, the existence of the Queen's Sister Control, the Blue Sky Takes Me Flying, Book Friend 201904221917091773, Simon DD41, The Tragedy of Double 11. Book Friend 20191025235406-98, XMD01, and Yemen Kyanians for their monthly tickets. Thanks to the big guys for their recommendation tickets. Chapter 74 Deal. Augustus' unreliable father, Angus, may be an outstanding politician and agitator, but he knows nothing about military affairs. He stubbornly believes that with a population of tens of millions and less than 250,000 mobilized soldiers, Korhal can compete with the powerful Terran Federation, and the weapons support of Umojan is not enough for the Korhal army to equalize the disadvantage. The Terran Federation has a fleet and resocialized soldiers, but Korhal IV lacks the most basic power armor. A year later, Korhal IV will inevitably become a cruel battlefield. Naturally, the more Augustus thinks, the more he understands that he and the Mengsk family are as fragile as candles in the wind. Now, Augustus has gradually put himself in the position of the leader of the rebels, and started to think about how he should deal with the severe situation and complex and changing political environment in the future. Reality forces Augustus to make early plans for the future. He must look far ahead and lay out his plans for more than 10 years. If Augustus must be involved in a new war, he must win the final victory and overthrow the federal government. Augustus was forced to do this, regardless of hatred, faith, or the ideal of liberating the people of Korhal and Terran. Augustus had to deal with anyone, or any force, that could help him in advance, and he knew that the support of Imogen was far from enough. At present, Augustus had only contacted Hill, the future leader of the mercenaries, and this person was worth using. Titus was barely half a person, and he controlled a black market trading network of unknown value. In the near future, Augustus would inevitably have to wrestle the captured federal military supplies. The Kel-morian Federation and Imogen would be big customers, but Augustus could not rely on them completely. After going around the town for a few times, Augustus finally brought the buyers to an abandoned and unattended underground garage. Renault, Amy Brandon and others were guarding 2 trucks full of weapons with electromagnetic guns. The big-bellied man trotted over and lifted the canvas on the truck. When he saw the neat and new equipment, his face suddenly showed a surprised expression. He turned to his men and said, "Quick, come and count the weapons and check if they can be used." Then, he fondled a power armor, as if he was caressing his lover. Although the power armors were all old CMC 200 models and the armor was worn out, they could still be sold at a high price. As for the 2 Goliath armed robots that were attired, but still well maintained, they were priceless treasures. There were many people willing to buy these powerful walking mechas, but Augustus still wanted to keep them for his own use. Because both the Terran Federation and the Kel-morian Federation gave priority to recovering power armor after the war, even higher than treating the wounded and burying the bodies. In order to prevent technology from leaking out, some high-tech weapons unique to the Federation, such as the airdrop capsules in the research and development trial stage, were even equipped with automatic decomposition power supply, which would automatically disintegrate and decompose 1 minute after landing. This resulted in very few standard equipment being lost, and the retired Marines that could be hired by the entire company would not appear until more than a decade later. At a time when class contradictions in the Terran Federation are prone to intensification, demonstrations in cities have gradually evolved into riots of looting, smashing, and burning. It seems that the ubiquitous and never-ending revolutionary army is inciting workers to revolt in the marginal star regions and destroying the army's transportation and supply lines. By this year, this sometimes even forced local governments to mobilize the Marine Corps and expand the police establishment. And those wealthy tycoons, entrepreneurs, bankers and major shareholders of listed companies are in urgent need of a group of powerful private armed forces to stop the thugs who dare to rob their property and deal with the assassination of the Revolutionary Army. Therefore, wrestling weapons is not only profitable, but often also profitable. Of course, the premise is that Augustus has channels and backgrounds. Not bad. He said, "Mr. Nicholas, you really didn't lie to us. The servo engine, fusion core, and armored skeleton are all intact, and the built-in computer has been reprogrammed using a third-party system." Augustus said, "I'm very satisfied." The big-bellied man turned around and glanced at the soldiers with guns and live ammunition around Augustus. "Perhaps we can deepen our cooperation in the future." He stretched out a hand and shook it with Augustus. "We are Cerberus Engineering. Now we are just a small biotechnology company that is unknown to the world, but one day we will be famous all over the world and then go public. That shouldn't be difficult." Augustus remembered the name. Cerberus was a confidential project during the Terran Empire. The main research projects were asocialization engineering, limb modification and control of alien insects. But it is still unclear what the relationship between this company and the Empire Cerberus project is, because the real Cerberus project was not rebuilt until 2,500 years later. The possibility of having the same name is relatively high, and there may not be much connection in fact. As the three-headed dog of hell in Greek mythology, the word Cerberus is often associated with monsters. Both the Kel-morian Federation and the Terran Federation have weapons or special forces named after this name. What is your company's main research? Biological genetic modification. There is a huge market for this in Tarsinus and Korhal. The man seemed to be a little embarrassed to speak. "We are currently studying how to control the Imogen cow so that this creature can produce milk according to our needs. but the technology we use is absolutely cutting edge. Our scientists have been able to implant special organic substances that can continue to grow in the third temporal lobe of the Yumajan cow's brain, thereby controlling its pregnancy response. This should be quite marketable. Does this also work on humans? Augustus asked casually. Of course, I don't want to make girls pregnant. No, no, no. The man waved his hands quickly. We can't experiment on living people. It's unethical. I'm just asking. Augustus said, we should each leave a fixed contact number that will not be easily changed. The boss behind me will definitely be interested in your project. You can contact me at any time. In any case, Augustus is still quite interested in this company. If possible, Augustus doesn't mind leading the future war dog Cerberus plan. With great pleasure. The man made an awkward ceremonial gesture, which looked like the style of an old nobleman from a certain main star world. When several bodyguards checked their equipment and reported to the big-bellied man, Augustus had already left his contact information with him. Next, Augustus's people began to check the banknotes. The price had been negotiated long ago. This batch of equipment sold for a total of about 12 million credits, most of which were power armor. This was enough to buy a 60 square meter house in the Queen's district of Korhal IV stealing. The Cerberus engineering people drove away quickly in a truck. In Rick's report, Augustus learned that at least 10 armed men went to meet them. We have to leave quickly, Ty just said, looking at the 2 Raptor armored vehicles in the parking lot. In this line of work, it's common for thieves to rob each other. What are you afraid of? Augustus told him not to be so nervous. We are here on vacation, and we have to have at least one meal before we go back. Augustus then led the heavenly demons out of the parking lot, and Titus followed, and he was quite courageous. They turned into a commercial street that was not so depressed, and walked into a Gothic-style spa hotel. From the outside, this towering Gothic building was extremely gorgeous, with rows of slender stone columns arranged in a radial pattern on the bow windows reflecting the deep yellow light, and Byzantine lions carved on the shell-colored railings outside the window. Everyone carried a gun, so no one dared to covet the contents of the box. Chapter 75 Revelation. The Uranus Mountains looked like a narrow snowy scar when viewed from low-altitude orbit. The magnificent mountains separate the first and fourth main continental plates on Telesis second. Long rivers originating from glaciers flow across the yellow surface of the planet, nourishing cities, towns, fields and herdsmen's livestock. In September, the battles in various parts of Telesis ended with the victory of the Terran Federation Army. With the support of the fleet, a large number of aircraft groups were able to run rampant over the citizen positions of the Kel-morians, forcing them to retreat underground and into the wilderness. Cities gradually returned to the control of the Federation Army. The fleet's capital ships monitored the synchronous orbit, and any Kel-morian spacecraft that attempted to escape the planet would be shot down the moment it escaped gravity. The Terran Federation's ground forces also gradually gained an overwhelming advantage. The Kel-morians were retreating, and even the towns were back in the hands of the Marines except for the Uranus Mountains. The remaining forces of the Sigurdran Legion are still hiding among the mountains. They have hollowed out several mountains and even built their bases deep underground. A large number of Sigurdran mountain squads hide in the valleys, canyons, and snow between the mountains, attacking any Terran Federation troops that dare to enter this place. So far, nearly 300 Marines and their guides have died here, buried by the continuous wind and snow. The Zulu outpost is located between 2 peaks on the edge of the Uranus Mountains, on a saddle-shaped ridge that is 7 miles long. There are 14 connected hills of varying heights on the ridge, with the lowest elevation being less than 300 feet. Each hill has a fortification made of presteel parapets, bunkers and barbed wire. Each bunker is connected to a 15 to 20 foot deep, wooden reinforced trench and air defense trench. This is the garrison of the 1st and 5th Battalions of the 4th Brigade of the 33rd Ground Assault Division, plus engineers, radar soldiers and artillery, with a total of more than 1,000 people. 5 miles away from the Zulu outpost, 2 brigades of the army are stationed, with a starport that can take off and land near ground and interstellar fighters. On a high ground on the ridge is a silver-gray command center, with 8 anti-aircraft missile towers standing in 4 different directions around this high-rise building. Augustus is standing in front of the huge bronze glass window of the command center office, looking at the mountains in the distance. His coffee-colored military uniform is neat and tidy, as if it has just been ironed. The golden vertical bar on his right shoulder shows that he is now a second lieutenant. An electronic clock on the wall shows that it is now 9 o'clock in the morning on September 11th. It has been nearly a month since Augustus last participated in the battle. During this month, his heavenly demons, as an independent force, cleared out Kel-morian sympathizers, anti-federal armed forces, and a small number of Sea Dragon squads that had separated from the main force in about 10 small towns near the How fortress. The heavenly demons did not encounter fierce resistance, and the biggest loss caused by the enemy was that one of them was slightly injured. In early September, Augustus's direct superior, Warfield, became the commander of the 5th Battalion, and he was promoted again to become a real officer. On September 5th, another brother battalion took over Warfield's defense duties, and the 5th Battalion was transferred to the Zulu outpost outside the Uranus Mountains. In Augustus' sight, there was a dense coniferous forest on the south slope of the ridge, and there were bare and sparse shrubs on the other slope. Standing on the ridge, and looking in this direction, you can see a circular valley between the mountains of the Uranus Mountains. There is a dense forest in the valley. The 700-yard-long forest between the ridge and the valley has been cut down by the space construction engineering vehicle equipped with a chainsaw, clearing a minefield for laying anti-infantry mines. A long half-frozen river flows out from the main peak of Uranus, the god of the sky, with the sound of breaking ice. The peaks of the mountains are soaring into the clouds, as if surrounded by clouds and storms. The mountain was very far away from Augustus. He could only see a peak covered by clouds. Augustus looked at this picturesque world, but he was not happy with such a quiet scenery. He didn't like it here. It was far away from the solid ground, damp and cold. The glaciers that looked beautiful were actually very dangerous. Compared with here, Augustus missed the warm and pleasant Kamor. He finally got tired of the war, and was tired of fighting one battle after another. For nearly half a year, Augustus had been killing people. He gradually became numb to it, and got used to the war. But it was finally coming to an end. Below the command center, the federal soldiers in the bunkers and trenches were retreating. The engineering vehicles were dismantling the bunkers, and sending steel plates to the transport planes. The barracks and engineering stations rose into the air in the red plasma stream released by the base thrusters, and the command center under Augustus' feet also rose in the deafening roar. Put this on. Wearing a pair of black goggles, Warfield appeared behind Augustus and handed him another pair of goggles of the same style. "Are you ready to look directly at a rising new sun?" Augustus said as he put on the goggles. "The explosion point is still far away from us," Warfield said. Augustus tried his best to look into the distance, staring at the peak of the main peak of the Uranus Mountains. He could not see the nuclear bomb that was falling into the atmosphere from the synchronous orbit. If he was close enough to the explosion point, Augustus would be able to see a thin white line, which would split into dozens of thinner white lines in a few seconds. An apocalypse-level nuclear bomb is enough to wipe a mountain range off the map. In an instant, an extreme white light spot lit up in the distance, and then the whole world was lit up. Augustus seemed to be able to hear the scream of the nuclear bomb passing through the atmosphere and the desperate cries of the seagulls. The avalanche began, and hundreds of snow-capped mountains seemed to jump and shook off the snow on their bodies. Then the extreme light and heat engulfed everything, and the rain clouds were torn apart and thrown far away, as if it was the wrath of Odin, or thunderous roar followed the light. The command center was as bright as day, and the walls were ended white. "Uranus is the source of many rivers in Telesis," Augustus said to Warfield. "For the Federation, that doesn't matter." Warfield sighed and said, "There are more than 10,000 elite Sea Dragon legions in the Uranus Mountains. It may take several years to recapture it and eliminate all the Kel-morians, and our warriors will pay many times the price. As for cleaning up the pollution and radiation, that is the business of the Telesis and their descendants. It's fucking bullshit. This is not my concern." Augustus looked at the world that was gradually darkening. The ridges, forests, and rivers no longer existed. Even the sky changed color, as if the dye that colored the world had disappeared. Augustus couldn't imagine the scene of 1,000 such nuclear bombs falling on Korhal. Look, the last piece of Pure Land has also belonged to the Federation. Can we take a break, Major? Not yet, Kit, said Warfield. The order has come down, and we will leave for Meinhof next week. The Kel-morians have been ravaging our land and homes for a long time. Now, we must launch a counterattack and seize the Kel-morians' colonies. I won't go, said Augustus. Before leaving Telesis, you'd better go see your brother, said Warfield with a sigh. He's about to retire, just when we are about to win the war. Of course I'll go see Arcturus, nodded Augustus. Do you know what your brother is going to do? None of us old subordinates can figure it out. He can become a general this year, Warfield said a little excitedly. I don't know. Augustus turned his face away. Thanks to Alcy, Monkey King, Wujisu 123, Luaksu, Jasmine, Corporal Carry-On Patrol, Zio Bricklayer, XMD01, Mengsk Rabbit, Kyan G, and Zeulan NPC for their monthly tickets. Thanks to yesterday's rain 2020, Command Aish, Eden Class World Ship, Agent Rangrong, Corporal Carry-On Patrol, Command Aish, Donald John, and the original Plan Sun for their awards. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.